still sleeping on the street. In these continuum of care programs, only once you have demonstrated some change, which we should keep in mind is incredibly difficult to achieve without housing stability, do these programs graduate you into housing arrangements, first shared housing, and slowly over time independent housing. To some, continuum of care approaches sound great. That is, in theory. They map onto our society's values of meritocracy, of security. Only those who are deserving get access to the prize of having a home. Under this mentality, if you don't have a home, it must be because you're just not good enough yet. Come back later. It should be obvious that these programs just don't work. Not only do they strip people of their agency and come with an enormous moral burden, but recidivism is high and a huge number of people don't make it into the program in the first place because of the high barrier to entry. Compare that to Housing First. In the initial study on Housing First, back in 2003, a randomized trial of the two approaches decidedly shows the strength of the new program. Around half of the initially homeless group were accepted into permanent housing, regardless of their eligibility according to other programs, and they were then offered tailored and optional care for their individual circumstances. The other half went through conventional channels, and at the end of the trial, the results were clear. The Housing First group spent more time in stable housing, less time hospitalized, and results carried over for longer than when homeless people went through the continuum of care path. Within just 6 months, Housing First had virtually eliminated homelessness in the experimental group. It was a massive success. That first study was in New York, and inspired by its promising results, the EU ran its own pilot programs in 5 European countries with the same outcome: secure, long-term housing stability. And now that it's become the official national policy of the Finnish government, we've seen just how much good this can achieve. It is abundantly clear that this approach works. Despite all of this, some of you might still be skeptical. Forget for a second that housing is a universal right we are all entitled to, that it is baked into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the US has signed onto and agreed to provide in front of the entire international community. Forget that this right doesn't include temporary shelters, but only real, stable housing, and that there are metrics around accessibility, affordability, discrimination, and protection from eviction which good Housing First programs conform to perfectly, in addition to affirming the basic idea of being decent to real human people. You might still wonder about costs in the wealthiest country in the world that regularly provides housing subsidies mostly to the wealthiest people in the country through mortgage interest tax deductions costing the American people, I don't know, $70 billion a year, or close to 25 times what is set aside for homelessness programs at the federal level. Imagine all that incredibly important stuff doesn't matter. It's gone, forget about it. Housing First is still cheaper than not housing people or walking them through an ineffective continuum of care program. Not only are people housed through Housing First covering part of the cost and are more easily employed, but housing people saves money in the long term on comparatively costly emergency hospitalization bills and absurdly expensive policing, which both go down when 1. People's needs are taken care of preventatively, and 2. They aren't exposed to an expensive state apparatus that has criminalized existing without a house. Given all this evidence, you're probably wondering, why aren't we doing this? To be fair, there are some small-scale examples of this in the US. The US Department of Housing and Urban Development does fund certain homelessness programs, some of them with the Housing First methods. However, these programs are only robust in a few cities and states. But no matter the nature of the program, whether it's Housing First, continuum of care, or something else, funding is far too low. The HUD's budget and municipal aid funds have steadily declined over time, and as a result, programs scrape together a budget from the general public and several different local and federal funds, rarely ever amounting to what they actually need to provide effective services. But the main problem behind all of this isn't that homelessness programs aren't getting enough funding. That is an issue just a little further down the line. The underlying problem is affordable housing. And at the core of that problem is our capitalist organization of the economy. Under a capitalist economy, housing isn't treated like the right it's considered to be by most nations, including, on paper, the United States. Instead, it's a commodity, something to be traded, speculated on, turned for a profit. That is the main goal of housing in a commodity market, not putting people in homes, making money. As a result, developers, investors, and the like don't focus their energy on housing the poor, from whom they can only extract so much, but rather on building luxury accommodations for the wealthy, leaving largely empty units across the country only rarely occupied, if at all, while people in desperate need of housing are refused access and subjected to a manufactured housing scarcity. On top of that, there is a very real incentive for capitalists to only partially resolve homelessness. The threat of losing the roof over your head keeps even the most exploited worker in a job they hate. Increasingly, that threat forces people into even more dire conditions as wages become less and less sufficient to cover housing costs, forcing people to take on several jobs and work untenable hours to avoid the possibility of eviction. It is not in the capitalist interest to remove that powerful, terrifying incentive. And here is where the Finnish success story may go beyond Housing First alone. Not only is Housing First doing a good job of taking people out of homelessness in a reliable way, but a social democratic organizing of the economy is limiting the extent to which people are likely to fall into it in the first place. It's still capitalism, so it still relies on somebody being exploited, in this case people in the global south, but at the very least, social democracy goes part of the way on neutering perverse capitalist incentives on continuing homelessness domestically. One key element of this is unionization. High unionization at 75% of the Finnish workforce, and therefore higher wages and higher job security than in freer markets, mean that as people exit homelessness, they are unlikely to be replaced or fall back into it themselves. American conservatives love to rail against Housing First, touting its failures to make significant changes in cities like Los Angeles, where homelessness has continued to rise despite Housing First programs taking root. What they conveniently forget to mention is that the continuum of care programs they prefer still deliver worse results. And the core issue of the skyrocketing housing prices in the free market is why people are even pushed out into homelessness in the first place. The thing is, it doesn't have to be this way. There are solutions to reduce the scale of this issue. Earlier this year, the Gravel Institute released a great video on one of these solutions, the decommodification of housing. I'll put a link to that video and all of the sources for this one in the description. At the end of the day, the conclusion that you should take away from the Finnish case isn't just that this one type of program works really well at taking people out of an incredibly difficult situation for the benefit of everyone. It does do that, but that's not the point. The Finnish example gives us a glimpse of how we can treat housing differently. Instead of being a game for the wealthy to gamble their own fortunes and the livelihoods of millions of Americans, Housing First shows us what housing really is: a necessity, a right. It's something that must come before almost everything else, something which we must guarantee, or fail to recognize the humanity of millions of people. If you're interested in what the future of housing might look like, I highly recommend you check out Home of the Future on CuriosityStream. It's a fascinating look at cutting-edge production methods and radically different approaches to housing than those we see today. CuriosityStream is an established streaming platform with a solid track record of caring about great educational content and the financial security of those who produce it. They've got thousands of nonfiction titles from some of the best filmmakers in the game. As you probably know, YouTube doesn't treat its creators very well. That's why some of my YouTuber friends and I teamed up to build Nebula, so we don't have to worry about demonetization. As educational creators ourselves, we love CuriosityStream, so we've worked out a deal, where if you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below, you'll also get access to Nebula, 100% free. That's less than $15 a year for both CuriosityStream and Nebula, which, in my humble opinion, is a pretty great deal. Since you're already on the internet watching my video, why not spend some time learning about fascinating topics on CuriosityStream? Or check out Nebula's original content, including my upcoming series on the resurgence of fascism. You can also watch all my videos as they were intended, ad-free. There really is something for everyone, and by signing up at the link below, you're helping us produce more content without the fear of demonetization. Give CuriosityStream a shot, and get free access to Nebula when you sign up using the link below. It really does help support my channel and educational creators all across YouTube. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, consider subscribing to stay up to date with my latest episodes. If you hated it, go ahead and drop a thumbs down. You can check out my previous episodes by clicking the links on your screen. Thanks for watching.
Check. Hello? Oh. So, I agree that housing should be decommodified because, I deal with a basically homeless mother because psychologically, and that's why I haven't been streaming a lot. because I run into problems with that, having to help out with that. Also, being a student, working at Starbucks part time, and having my own rent to pay. So, hard to live a life how you want to when basic necessities are not provided. Really difficult to keep up, in my opinion. Going.
Watching, and I'll see you next week.
Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about the self-help, financial advice, lifestyle YouTube channel alux.com. Sitting at over 3.5 million subscribers, Alux advertised itself as the place where future billionaires come to get inspired.
Welcome to alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired.
The first thing that caught my eye about Alux videos was how vaguely terrifying all of them are. The host of the channel speaks in this robotic, over-enthusiastic tone, and the videos consist only of stock footage, often stock footage of faceless people walking through crowded cities. The whole thing frankly makes me feel like I'm living in some kind of a fictional dystopia, where a robot is about to inject me with lethal serum because I've become obsolete to my corporate overlords.
This is the Sunday Motivational Video. Every Sunday, we bring you a different type of video, which should improve your life. Today, we're looking at 15 things poor people waste money on.
But no, Alux is real in our world. It's all too real. And somehow, the content of the channel is even more cursed and surreal than its aesthetic is. Alux is, to its credit, one of the strangest YouTube channels I have ever come across in my life, and I'm excited to talk about it today. Part 1. Hustle Culture and the Poor. So Alux has a vast library of videos with topics ranging from the lifestyles of the rich to the intricacies of simp culture.
Hello, Aluxers. We have a juicy topic for you today. Buckle up because this is gonna be a roller coaster ride as we unpack the facts about simping.
And that means two things. One, I can't get to all of it and didn't try. There are certainly tons of Alux videos that I have not seen. And two, they sometimes might say stuff that departs from what you'll see in this video. Nonetheless, I'm going to be talking about a lot of their videos today, focusing on one of their strangest and most popular topics, comparing the practices, attitudes, and behaviors of rich people to those of poor people. Stuff like 15 things poor people do that the rich don't, the 15 rules of poverty, and the 15 reasons staying poor is a choice. Delightful. So, if you take a step back from these videos and look at the bigger picture, the theme here is obvious and uncomplicated. Poor people are in their social class because they have the wrong mindset, and to be frank, are just a bit stupid. To be sure, this is not a particularly odd theme for a bit of media to have. Hating poor people is one of America's favorite traditions. But it is interesting to see just how on the nose Alux is about it. Many of their suggestions are useless, cruel, petty, or just downright unhinged. And let's go through a fun list of these takes right now. 1. They claim that poor people are simply lazy and that one of the main kinds of lazy poor people just hates work, loves welfare, and loves pumping out lottery babies they think will get them out of poverty.
There are two types of laziness. 1. People who despise work and would rather sit at home and collect welfare, pump out children so they can use them to keep themselves alive, and maybe one of the children will be their ticket out.
They give another definition of laziness later on, but let's focus on this one because it's rude and bad and also super weird. Like, especially that lottery baby point. They say that multiple times across their videography, and I never have any clue where they're getting it from.
There's something interesting we've seen in poor communities that we want to share with you. It's this concept of a lottery child. Basically, you make as many children as you can in the hopes that one of them will make it and will take care of everyone else.
I've researched this topic a bit, and in none of the articles I've read did it ever indicate that poor people have more kids because they think one of them will strike it big. Just a strange, insulting thing to say about poor people. 2. A common point for them is that poor people are entitled or just want handouts, claiming that unlike the feted poor, rich people don't protest or boycott.
The rich don't protest or boycott, they produce. The true rich got to where they are by creating value for others. That's the only recipe to richest.
So this point sucks because A, poor people should be more empowered in our society. They should be protesting and dangling some ridiculous prospect of them becoming extraordinarily rich so as to stifle class antagonism and the fight for workers' rights is demonic. And B, isn't this kind of putting the cart before the horse? You know, if you're a well-off person on the road to becoming a billionaire or whatever, of course you're not agitating for welfare or better conditions. You already have those things. You know, there's no need. 3. In one of their videos, they say some of the strangest sentences I have ever heard. That, in essence, the reason poor people are poor is that money flees the hands that don't work for it.
Money flees the hands that don't work for it. Have you ever noticed how those who are bad with money can never seem to keep a hold of it? Even if fortune hits them in the face, it only takes a couple of years for them to get back to the place they started in. This is because money doesn't like people who don't work for money, so it flees to find new owners.
So this point amounts to a kind of surreal money mysticism, one that seeks quite obviously to justify the current distribution of wealth. You know, why do rich people own more than you do? Well, it's because money seeks the hands that work for it, and you must not be working. What's even stranger than this point, though, is the argument they use to justify it. This weird spiel about UBI in Finland.
A recent study done on UBI, or Universal Basic Income, done in Finland over 2 years, where they gave people €1,000 or $1,100 every single month with no strings attached, has seen no real improvement in their ability to get their lives together. The only noticeable result is the money made them more happy, but nothing else. They didn't find a place to work, they didn't follow their passions, nothing to the effect of economical transformation. You see, money solves money problems. Poverty isn't a money problem because the money you can give is always finite.
So I have, and I count, 4 things to say to this point, and I'm gonna go through every single one of them. The pacing of this video be damned, I guess. Let's do a sub-list of the strange things about this take. A. This video sucks. How does any of this demonstrate the point that money flees the hands that don't work for money? Is she saying that by virtue of the fact that they didn't work for UBI, the money fled their hands? Because I don't think she proved that one out. It seems like they're gonna need to do more to demonstrate that point, because right now this entire thing looks like a random non sequitur. B. Most people consider the Finland UBI experiment a success. It's a bit complicated, but it seems people on UBI worked more, felt happier, and thought better of the government than did the control group. I don't know where they got the idea that nobody really got their lives together or followed their dreams, but I don't even think that's true. Like, propensity to follow dreams wasn't tested statistically, but they did conduct interviews with UBI recipients, and let me read you a passage of that here. For some, the experiment offered new opportunities of participating in society, for instance, through voluntary work or informal care. Many interviewees said that the basic income strengthened the feeling of autonomy. Kind of looks like they pursued their goals more. I don't know what they're talking about. C. Okay, this one may seem pedantic, but what are they talking about right here when they claim that's why poverty isn't a money problem, because the amount you can give is always finite? Like, to be clear, I'm not totally against their conclusion. I think building up infrastructure and opportunity is a fine idea. But who cares if the amount of welfare you can give is finite? The planet is finite. Humanity is finite. Our basic needs and desires are finite. The finitude of the money we can give people is not on the face of it evidence that giving them that money is a poor policy decision. Like, people who got UBI were less impoverished than the control group was. You can't unilaterally say that money doesn't solve poverty when that's quite literally something that happened in the very study you're talking about. D. The Alux lady saying the UBI only made people happier, like that's a bad thing, is just, it's so funny to me.
The only noticeable result is the money made them more happy, but nothing else.
Like, even if she's right and that's all they got, that seems cool to me. I'm down for the happiness policy, personally. Anyway, that's all for the problems I had with this point. Let's get back to the larger main list of Alux talking points that I think are weird. 4. I'm really fascinated by what Alux says about working class people doing stuff that makes them look nice.
Have you seen the nails and the haircuts on people who can't even afford to fix their cars? This is one of the most annoying things that we see that keeps people from becoming better. You've worked your butt off the entire week and then reward yourself with a new hairstyle that's going to fade away in 2 weeks to impress people who are not doing any better than yourself. Ever noticed how almost all rich people have the same simple haircut? Instead of throwing money out the window, start fixing your windows.
This is just so deeply off-putting to me. Like, so what? People enjoy doing stuff that makes them feel comfortable and happy. I understand they could be saving all that money, but as you just said, they were working hard all week. Why are we blaming them for taking some amount of pleasure in their lives? No, you have to be like Mark Zuckerberg and buy $400 t-shirts and look shitty on purpose because he's a white rich guy and respect for him is the default. I don't know. The tone the Alux lady uses makes it seem like people are choosing between escaping poverty and getting their nails done, and I think that sucks. Personally. 5. This is kind of related. At one point they claim that poor people just take out too many loans, like payday loans. And let's face it, they're using these loans to buy frivolous shit that they don't even need.
What are you doing buying a TV on credit? Why are you ready to go into installment payments on the new PlayStation? Why are you borrowing money to buy a dress or a handbag? Just stop! We know many people lack access to funding in case of emergencies, which is why they're taken advantage of by predatory loan shark-like institutions. Believe it or not, these people borrow money from payday loan companies without understanding the contracts they're signing. They're paying 70 to 250% yearly interest on the money they're borrowing for stupid.
This take is so deeply misplaced that I don't really know what to do with it. They imply that these people are desperate, which is why they take out the loans, but that doesn't stop them from calling what these people are buying stupid shit. Look, again, I'm not denying that people sometimes go into debt for pleasure purchases, but that's just not the whole story of predatory debt. Not even close. A quick trip to Pew Research will reveal that in 2012, 69% of payday loans are taken to pay off recurring expenses, utilities, credit cards, bills, rent, food, etc. 16% go to emergencies, cars breaking down, medical problems. Most people who take out these loans can't afford not to do so. They need to cut back on life expenses like food and clothing. They need to delay paying bills, and they need to pawn their possessions. Avoiding this basic fact, pretending that people have the option to only go into debt to make more money, is absurd. And the reason they're saying it is because they hate poor people. 6. Okay, so in their video, Rules of Poverty, the Alux lady talks for a bit about the chains keeping people poor and how you must break them if you ever want to find success. And the chains they include are just so odd.
You need to free yourself of every chain keeping you in poverty if you want to escape it. The most common chains are family and a lack of parental guidance, education, infrastructure, like basic utilities or access to financial instruments, like a bank or a market, geography, health, a lack of early employment opportunity, and addiction. As long as you still have one chain locked, there's no way for you to run toward the horizon.
Like, you can't change these things about yourself, Alux. By the time you're 25, you can't make it so that you have early employment opportunities or a loving family. So why are you acting like people can free themselves of these chains? They can't. You can't. You must realize objectively they can't do that. 7. At one point they say that making money is easier than spending it.
The hard part is keeping the money, not making it. Making money is no secret. You get a job or sell a product or service. That's basically your only two options. But very few people know how to keep it and grow it once they have it. How many of you are spending money you don't have? How far behind the line are you where you're doing the math in your head and hope the people you borrowed from will just forget about it?
So obviously, this is a way of fetishizing the rich, right? Rich people are doing the super hard thing, keeping their money, whereas you, the poor, fall to temptation and buy stuff. I don't know what to say to this besides that's not true. Keeping extra money that doesn't go toward living expenses is actually way easier than making it. I don't want to blow your mind, but poor people have less money than rich people do, and I think that's probably the biggest reason why they can't save it. But if they had more money, it would be easier for them to save it. For most of us, the job would be the harder thing to do. Personally, that's true for me, and I think you'll find, if you look into your own experiences, that it's actually a lot easier for you too. Because the working part is the harder part for almost every person who lives. 8. Okay, this list is getting old, so just one more thing. Sometimes Alux goes for this vague Ayn Rand energy and talks about how the rich are the real producers. Like in this video called 15 Things Rich People Do That the Poor Don't, they claim that all of the innovation of recent history has been performed by financiers who invested in progress.
They're making the world a better place. This is what the poor hate to be told, and it's probably the point on this list we're going to get most of our hate from. Believe it or not, the bulk of all innovation in the history of mankind was financed by the wealthy. Everything around you and everything we know about the world today wouldn't exist without some rich person or group making a very risky bet.
I mostly wanted to bring this up because it feels relevant to their ethos, but there's not much of interest to say here. Yes, for much of human history, the commons have been privately owned by relatively few hands, and therefore anything produced with those commons using its resources can be taken as a win for the owning class. But isn't that kind of a shitty, low-effort, vacuous win? Like, yeah, you got it. You own all the stuff, so we had to use it to make things, so it's kind of like you made all those things yourself and are the true innovator of history. I don't know, we could talk about this a lot more, obviously, but we have to move on. So there we have it. We have our big list of weird takes, and frankly, I do find it mind-blowing, just in terms of how aggressive and bad it is. But at the same time, if we wanted to ask, what is this media doing? I think the answer would be pretty forthcoming. See, if you are in the audience for these videos, a working class person who aspires to be a billionaire, you might go down these points and find something that affirms your choices and identity. You, unlike most poor people, don't spend a ton of money getting your nails done. You don't protest anything or have big demands. You don't think you're lazy, don't love getting welfare, don't take out lots of frivolous loans, and don't have lottery babies. You can look at the videos and say, yes, I am working class, but because I am not the average working class as described here, there is hope for me yet. Better watch more Alux, better do what they say and read the books they get money for me reading. It is through this perverse logic that the more they demean poor people, the more they lie about them, the more a subset of that audience might identify with their work. I don't know any of this, mind you. I didn't conduct a survey of Alux videos. I'm just saying that from the outside, this seems like a reasonable way of understanding Alux's choices, how their videos might come off as appealing, engaging, or inspiring. So, okay. I think this channel is a con and that they are manipulating people in some very pernicious ways. But we are just getting started. These videos get so much weirder. It just gets so odd so fast. Part 2, a dystopia in relief. So I was watching some of these videos about poor people and rich people when I stumbled upon this point.
The hardest working person in the world likely lives in poverty. Wealth, or the lack of it, is a result of your ability to use the tools you have at your disposal. The problem arises when there isn't proper access to the tools required to escape poverty. If hard work was all it took to be wealthy, the richest people in the world would be the children working in the cobalt mines to get you your iPhone.
This is interesting, I think. I mean, what she says here is true, and it's not even particularly controversial. It's straightforwardly a myth of capitalism that hard work is rewarded in some absolute sense. But The Alux lady isn't simply saying this fact, she is framing it as a fundamental injustice. First, she says very directly that no matter how hard people work, the problem is that they simply lack the tools to get out of poverty, to magically make their labor more profitable. Then, she includes this very visceral example, a child mining for cobalt. It is impossible to hear this and not think, wow, that's pretty fucked up, isn't it? I don't know if he should be rewarded because he works so hard or because he's literally a child, but in either case, capitalism clearly led us to a disturbing outcome. By all accounts, according to anybody's conscience, the kid should have more power than he does. This is a bit of a theme on Alux, this language that seems to be consciously critiquing modern capitalism. Like, Alux will talk about how poor people end up having to spend more money than the rich do in a lot of cases for a variety of reasons.
Some of you might be wondering right now, how come it's so expensive to be poor when being poor means you have no money? But look at it this way. You don't have money to fix a cavity, so you ignore it. The tooth gets compromised and now you have to get an implant. The cavity fix was a couple of hundred. The implant is a couple of thousand.
They even have an entire video dedicated to this one point. And isn't that kind of an accurate and powerful case to make? That poor people not only make little, but also have to spend more of it than the rich do? Or they talk about Finland in a really positive way in one video.
We're looking at 15 reasons Finland is the happiest country. Finland minds the gap. The widening wage inequality gap is one of the leading reasons for unhappiness in many countries. Finland has fought against this type of inequality since Vuonna Näkijämusi. It has always been a priority for the country.
Now, I'm not saying this is any kind of radical point they're making here, but doesn't it seem to affirm the goodness of redistribution? Make a claim about how poor people should be treated and implicitly criticize policies that enforce extreme wealth inequality? Finally, we have another recurring idea on Alux, the claim that debt causes you to lose self-ownership, that it, and this is a verbatim quote, is the modern-day version of slavery.
Think of it like this. If dollars were seen as freedom points, you'd look at the world differently. Most people in the US end up in debt before they're old enough to drink. Most of them spend the rest of their lives trying to repay it. When the main focus of your existence is paying off the fruits of your labor to someone else, isn't that just another form of slavery?
Now, we could have a very long conversation about what that sentence means and what it means to Alux, but nevertheless, I think we can recognize that Alux is using some very loaded and kinda powerful language here. From their perspective, our culture of debt, the way capital actively profits from our failure to pay our bills, is by its nature authoritarian, freedom-destroying. It is a bad thing to no longer own yourself, and from their perspective, many Americans do not. That's really interesting, isn't it? In the first part of this video, we went through a lengthy list of ways that Alux hates the poor, but how can that work now? Like, on a basic, intuitive level, how can you say that the working class are lazy and unwilling to learn new skills, say that money flees hands that don't work for money, and then say working hard isn't rewarded and people in poverty don't have the tools to get out of it? How can you say the poor take out so many frivolous loans, that's why they go into debt, and then say living as a poor person is just more expensive in a lot of intractable ways? How can you claim that money isn't the problem, that the poor ask for too many handouts? How can you criticize UBI and then celebrate one of the most robust welfare states in the world, the very country that tried that UBI program to a substantial degree of success? How can you accept and endorse the absolute control the rich have over our society, call them innovators, and lavish them with praise, and then go on to talk about how they own us, how our debt makes us their slaves? Well, I, for one, want to tell myself a nice story. Perhaps this is just the truth seeping in somehow. The channel spends so much of its time trashing the poor, presenting lies and misdirections about the way the world works, and maybe these points that criticize capitalism represent a reality that cannot be obscured entirely. As much as we might try to avoid it, at some point you have to see that the poor aren't lazy or stupid, that working hard often does go unrewarded, that the rich take advantage of the working class's lack of power. These truths sometimes just come out, whether you like it or not. So, okay, what do you think of that story? Do you think that's a good conclusion to this video, that it represents the truth about Alux? Well, unfortunately, I don't. Here's one of Alux's most interesting takes about how media is the opiate of the masses.
You might say, but Alux, I'm watching The Big Bang Theory, which is a really funny show, and it helps me disconnect. That's exactly the issue. You disconnect from your problems instead of dealing with them and getting them out of the way.
And this exact point is repeated when it comes to sports in another video.
It's the same with television. It's escapism from your current reality.
Now, I don't really agree with this. What's the point of living if you can't enjoy yourself and have fun with art? I don't see time with media or sports as broadly wasted, and I would question the assumptions that go into that claim. But if we do commit to this position, as Alux does, it has an odd implication. See, in both the point about media and the point about sports, the lady says the same thing. You should only engage in these things if you are making them, if you own the team or own the channel.
Celebrity gossip and buzz offers no value to your life. It only serves the celebrities. Rich people aim to be on TV instead of watching it. The truth is, unless you're a professional athlete or an owner of one of the teams, there's really no reason for you to watch sports.
And you look at that and think, why would you do a thing like that? Why would you advise the production of media if all media does is stifle the working class and prevent their ascent? You can see the same thing coming up when they talk about consumerism, right?
No, you don't need 6 phone cases, the funky socks, kitchen appliances you only used once, and the list goes on forever. You are well aware of what the essentials in your life are, the things you actually need. Everything else is just marketed to you. They are brainwashing you into thinking you need said product despite you only wanting it.
Like, they will castigate poor people for getting impulse purchases, yet in the same breath, they'll describe what the rich are doing as brainwashing, lying to people in damaging ways so as to enrich themselves. In other words, to become rich, to be rich, you are directed specifically to produce harmful material for the poor. But see, that's what they want. This is the problem with trying to find logical contradictions within the universe of Alux. It might look fun or interesting, but in the end, it obscures the obvious positions that the entire channel surrounds. And here they are. 1. Being poor is bad, and for them, that sentence is true in every way it could be read. Of course, it is bad in the material sense. Poor people are worse off, don't have power or freedom to change their lives. But it is also bad in a psychological, moral, almost spiritual sense. Poor people are lazy and stupid. They expect too many entitlements. They are frivolous. They subjugate themselves to the manipulation of the ruling class. It's debt. It's consumerism. Perhaps more importantly, 2, being rich is good. It is good materially, rich people are better off, but it is also good morally and spiritually. The rich are the producers and the innovators. They see the world as it is and change accordingly. They can exist at a higher level of consciousness, throwing off the shackles that society places on them.
The way society makes people fit is by crushing them into the empty hole it finds in the immediate vicinity of the individual. There are 2 selves within us. There is the true self, the one where if every door was open for us, we would eventually become them. And then there's another identity dictated by what we think society wants us to be. Wealth allows you to put distance between your reality and that pestering voice.
And sure, the rich don't always treat the poor well. Wealth inequality might be a problem. Poor people are not paid for their hard work. But none of this matters to Alux. All of it kind of makes sense from their perspective. Because at the end of the day, the rich are good. They get to make the media. and the poor are bad. They get to consume it and be made docile. The world of Alux is a hateful and misanthropic one, and your only hope is that someday, with their help, maybe you can own it. Wow, Big Joel is an epic champion who always manages to leave me satisfied, yet hungry for more. That is what literally every last one of you in my audience is saying right now, and it's why I'm excited to talk about the streaming service Nebula. Every month for the foreseeable future, I'll be releasing a little bonus video there. At this point, I think I have like 5 videos up. It's getting kind of stacked, honestly. But for example, I have one about Shane Dawson, one about a weird conspiracy theory I saw on Twitter, and in this one, I talk about a fun, strange Alux point that I literally could not fit into this video.
$1 million per year isn't a lot of money.
These videos can be released to the public after a long time, usually like a year, but most of them probably won't be, since they're not always algorithm friendly or something I want to release on the main channel. I love making these little boys, and I hope you like them too. It's shocking, even to me, how many frivolous, hot takes I have inside of me. Where did I get this terrible power? The whole thing is pretty cool. With a subscription to CuriosityStream where you can watch great nature documentaries like this David Attenborough one about ants that I literally always bring up, you also get access to Nebula, where you get my videos early, those bonus ones, and access to tons of other stuff. Work from Lindsay Ellis, Sarah Zed, Tom Scott, and I can't even believe how much more. For $15, you get the whole thing for a year, so not too bad. Anyhow, if you're interested, sign up at the link in the description, curiositystream.com/BigJoel. So that's it. That's the end of the video. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, give me money on Patreon if you want to. That would be cool. The patrons get all the bonus videos that I do for Nebula, so you don't have to worry about that. And now it's time for my Patreon question of the video. Oscar Vivier asks, are you reading any books currently? I'm reading 3 books right now. I'm reading a novel called Earthlings, which is very fun but hard to get through even though it's really short. I'm reading a book called Practical Wisdom about virtue ethics that was recommended to me by Sarah Z, no less. And most importantly, I'm reading Crazy Rich Asians. I'm mostly reading Crazy Rich Asians. I am fascinated by the film Crazy Rich Asians, and I can't put it down. I am obsessed with it. Okay, bye. Thanks again for watching and everything. Have a nice day. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream and Nebula. Hey everybody, so a few weeks ago now, I encountered one of the strangest tweets I have ever seen in my life. On June 7th, 2021, Shoeonhead, an online influencer, said this. Fucking animals is bad. Globe emoji, sock emoji, rose emoji.
Oh yeah, I already watched this. About vegetarianism or veganism. They were questioning, for the sake of discussion, if you can, morally accept that eating animals is bad, or if you can't morally accept that, but you accept that fucking animals. Explain yourself. Why isn't eating animals bad? And you can watch it for yourself. I've seen it. I don't really care to watch it again. 20 minutes. On Trump with corporate sponsored rebellion. Very fun.
Hi, Lonerbox here. You know, that guy from youtube.gov/we are the colony of octopod computer chips that live in the walls of your skull, Lamal. The US election.
This is the second Loner Box video that I will have watched after this. I liked his first one. All these people with good voices are entertaining to watch their video essays, typically long, anti. So let's see where this goes. Sorry if I don't pause it to talk, but this is just kind of the warm up to the stream. To watch some YouTube, figured that you might want to watch it. see what I'm watching. So, here you are.
Is over, I think. The hysteria around voter fraud seems to be dying down in the face of the Supreme Court and potentially a live in the walls of your skull, Lamal. The US election is over, I think. The hysteria around voter fraud seems to be dying down in the face of the Supreme Court and potentially a lot of people perjuring themselves. Their bold claims have evaporated like the last drops of sludge in Rudy Giuliani's brain. Sources in the White House report that Trump is looking increasingly listless and deflated, like he already has one foot in the dustbin of history. But his presidency has been one of those things that pretentious soy brains like myself will probably be trying to explain for decades. In the meantime, here's one video. Part 1. Johnny Rotten. So there's this line I keep on hearing from Trump supporters towards Democrats, which more or less goes, "You've brought back the establishment." And the more I hear this line, I'm reminded of an old tweet from Paul Joseph Watson, a man so insecure he's been tilting his head back for the best part of 10 years because he thinks it'll make him look more masculine. And in his tweet, he simply says, "Conservatism is the new punk rock." Now, at first, this just sounds like the words of someone with no self-awareness and a very apparent humiliation fetish. But watching Trump's defeat, it got me thinking, in a way, I kind of agree with it. What? Okay, so what is punk rock? Safety pins, mohawks, leather jackets, bass players who couldn't play the bass, and the big thing was being anti-establishment. There's a bit of contention about where it came from. It's most likely that the first punk rock scene came from New York in the mid-70s and then arrived in West London shortly after. There is an interesting theory that the punk sound was pioneered by a black three-piece from Detroit called Death, although I should stress that this is just a theory because I wouldn't want to upset anyone. But one thing we do know is that almost from the very beginning, punk rock was corporate manufactured. Though the movement did bring a wave of DIY bands and independent labels, punk rock was also backed by multinational labels. It was intertwined with the fashion industry, and it was broadcast on TV and radio stations around the world. Sure, you could argue that it worked as a kind of foot in the door for ideas like socialism and anarchism, and a lot of bands like The Clash in particular did quite well at that. There was also the radical feminist wing of punk rock, which was pioneered by Bikini Kill. Their singer Kathleen Hanna had a reputation for going into the crowd to personally remove male hecklers, which is based, but that wasn't until the 90s. But what exactly was punk itself saying? Who was the establishment? How do we get rid of them? What do we do when they're gone? The thing is, and a lot of fans will tell you this, punk was never about offering answers. It was an aesthetic. Bands would write songs about getting blackout drunk on the weekend just so they could show up at work hungover on a Monday morning. It was a way of claiming victory and conceding defeat at the same time. If you listen to folk protest songs, the words are almost instructional. They point to very clear acts like unionizing, demonstrating, and occasionally even voting. Commercial punk, on the other hand, seems both confusing and confused. For the purpose of this video, I want to zoom in on one of the big poster boys of punk, the Sex Pistols. Anthems like Anarchy in the UK, where the words are literally, "I'm an anarchist, don't know what I want," or "Anarchy for the UK, it's coming sometime and maybe, I give a wrong time, stop a traffic line," and it's just like, okay, giving the wrong time or stopping a traffic line, yeah, I'm sure the establishment are really quaking about that. F***ing Sex Pistols. Like, what exactly was that band about? I know they were known for controversial interviews, so let's have a look at one of those.
Good Lord. Now, I want to know one thing. Beethoven, Mozart, Bach and Brahms have all died. Really?
Just watch. Trying this one.
What are we saying, sir?
Wonderful people.
Are they?
Oh yes, they really turn us on.
What do they do?
Well, suppose they turn other people on.
That's just their tough treat.
Which one?
Nothing, a rude word. Next question.
No. What was the rude word?
Shit.
Was it really? Good heavens, you frightened me to
Oh,
death.
all right.
And then every f***ing one knew what punk was about. Yeah, wearing a swastika on TV and saying fuck to a creepy interviewer a couple of times. Really bucking the system there. What is Johnny Rotten doing these days? Oh, look, he's standing Trump because he apparently speaks to the working class in him. This might be a good point to mention. The median household income of Trump voters in 2016 was $72,000. That's higher than Bernie and Clinton, so it's good to know that most working class people are still less full of shit than Johnny Rotten is. I fucking hate the Sex Pistols. Where were we? Right, okay. The Establishment. Part 2. Hostile Brothers. So, based on what I've heard from left and right-wing voices, the establishment roughly includes the fossil fuel industry, Wall Street, the education system, the IMF, corporations, war hawks, HR departments, mainstream media, woke cinema, and corporate lobbied politicians. And with this, the idea that Trump is somehow outside of the establishment is kind of defensible. Trump's business is in things like real estate, casinos, hotels, the occasional media appearance. But lucrative as these things can be, they pale in comparison to something like finance. And it's easy to see why someone as pathologically narcissistic as Trump would stand himself up against the immense wealth of people on Wall Street, and even with his fortune, feel small by comparison. The establishment isn't a monolith. As Marx would have put it, they're more like a band of hostile brothers. And when Trump sees himself as an outsider, he means it. But as for his efforts as an anti-establishment leader, well, he came out of the Paris Climate Agreement, he held the support of top investors until just before the election, he used an executive order to try and promote patriotic education across the country, he imposed sanctions against Venezuela and tried to install a leader that no one voted for, he gave out massive tax breaks to the highest earners, he intensified drone strikes, and increased the presence of private mercenaries in the Middle East. So if the establishment to you is just, minority representation and people facing consequences for shitty behavior, then I guess Trump's your guy? Has he made it harder for corporations to fire people? Is popular culture less woke than it was in 2016? Well, no. Because Trump doesn't care if you get banned from Twitter, or if you get fired for maybe being racist. It's almost as if he's never been fussed about people getting fired for arbitrary reasons.
You're fired.
But okay, the problem is, all I've done so far is call out a few anti-establishment types as hypocrites, which isn't enough. Being a hypocrite doesn't make you wrong. And as a leftist, I'm not going to take the position of pro-establishment. The question I want to ask is, how did the idea of being anti-establishment become so weak that this crooked billionaire could pass himself off as its champion? Well, part 3, what is? You see, there's this thing called Marxism, and a few decades ago, it was a really big deal. And I don't mean in the sense of paranoid conservatives complaining about it all the time. I mean, throughout the 20th century, socialist and communist parties were prevalent over all of Western Europe. Their influence culminated in strikes and riots across the continent, and peaked in 1968 when a coalition of students and workers in France nearly spurred a full-scale revolution. When they were defeated, public interest in Marxism and communism started to decline, and the idea of revolution in the West faded into a pipe dream. This paved the way for the postmodernists, a group of poncy French intellectuals who wrote some really vague, long-winded shit about how we've all become consumers, identifying more with our favorite purchases, celebrities, and YouTube channels than with our material conditions as workers. With people becoming more and more entranced by this landfill of symbols and identities, postmodernists believed the idea of people organizing along the lines of something like class was impossible. Social movements that were once famous for challenging the world started to turn their attention inwards towards the individual. The hippies of the anti-war movement would later become the hippies of New Age and self-discovery bullshit. As the philosopher Jean-François Lyotard put it, the social foundation of the principle of division, or class struggle, was blurred to the point of losing all of its radicality. We cannot conceal the fact that the critical model, in the end, lost its theoretical standing and was reduced to the status of a utopia or a token protest in the name of man or reason or creativity. It's a mystery why postmodernists and Marxists don't get along, eh? But whatever you think of postmodernism, it's difficult to ignore the observation. We live in the age of the individual, you know. Don't call yourself a socialist or working class, just be yourself, like everyone else is doing. One of the other central characteristics of postmodernism is a skepticism of social progress, which is probably why all these people who come waltzing in with their fully costed policies aimed at making the world a better place are always instinctively met with suspicion. For postmodernists, the only victories that can be won are symbolic, not material. So it was with punk rock, and so it is with Trump. And in a world where the people of the biggest economy on earth can't even dream about everyone having their healthcare covered, the bar for political expectation is set very low. And for the legions of people who lose their shit every time someone suggests that they might possibly maybe in some way hold some kind of bias or privilege, or for the shotgun dads who were fed up of having to contain their vulgarities at the dinner table, the act of voting in someone who finally presented themselves as one of their own was as good as politics could get. After Obama's failure to live up to voter expectations, and with Bernie Sanders out of the way, the idea of any meaningful political change happening in America was laughable. The only anti-establishment move left was to do something that would slightly irritate the incumbents. Once again, claiming victory and conceding defeat at the same time. Which is kind of sad, really. And this brand of postmodern politics isn't just confined to the United States. During the Brexit referendum, it was thanks to that same use of aesthetics and symbolism that a bunch of spoiled rotten city traders and daddy's little patriotic pony fuckers succeeded in passing themselves off as an insurgency. Conservatism is the new punk rock. It's a corporate-sponsored rebellion laced with false promises and empty slogans. The phrase "Make America Great Again" was never a message of hope. It was nostalgia for a time that never existed. The wall is a glorified fence at best, and the swamp is now a mountain of black sludge. But with Trump gone, it's only a matter of time before the copium runs out and his followers realize that he is in no way exceptional. And as long as the same resentment and hopelessness that produced his presidency remains, it's only a matter of time before someone just as bad, if not worse, comes in to take his place. Because Trump's contradictory image as an anti-establishment figurehead embedded within the system is nothing new. The Sex Pistols may have been the poster boys for punk rock and anti-establishment politics, but the fact that they were part of a marketing scheme from day one is well documented. They were brought together by their manager Malcolm McLaren, who always saw them as a vehicle to promote his clothes shop, which had connections to Vivienne Westwood. After 2 years and only one album, the band collapsed. At their last gig in San Francisco, Johnny Rotten famously asked the crowd, "Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?" His deflated tone made it sound as if the question was as much for himself as it was for the audience. And when I look at the state of Trump supporters online right now, I just wonder if the same thing applies to them. Maybe the voter fraud thing was a kind of projection? Let's talk about Freud. No, I'm joking. Merry Christmas. Fuck off. Lacrimosa di
What a character, man.
Jet ex favela iudicandos
He wrote this.
homoreus lacrimosa
Like his voice, right?
Quare sujet ex favela iudicandos homoreus.
I thought that was interesting. I'll probably take away a agreement is that Trump was by establishment, and he tried to sell himself off like that. But people who believed that were claiming victory and defeat at the same time, right? I did like that part. Second one. Skip it. Too many loner boxes. He's quite a character, right? Very interesting. Opinionated, which I respect. You don't have to agree with people's opinions. Like the Sex Pistols. Yeah, people agreed with Trump, thinking that like he would disrupt how wildly politician, right? Like he said, yeah, I guess he kind of did that. But like, is that really it? First, InfoWars suggested to me, which I do want to watch.
Hey everybody, so recently, Sargon of Akkad made a video responding to a piece of mine called Anita Sarkeesian and the People Who Hate Her. What he came up with was an interesting response, and it's the topic of today's video. Now, I don't want to belabor this intro too much, so let me just tell you the 2 questions I hope to answer over the course of this video. The first question I'll answer, the thing that everybody's probably the most interested in, does Sargon of Akkad destroy my ass with facts and logic? The second question I'll answer, the thing I'm more interested in, what does this video say? Like, as a work of art? What can it tell us about Sargon of Akkad or anything else? So that's this video, and I hope you enjoy. I'd recommend watching Sargon's video and my own before checking this out, but that's like 80 minutes of your time, so I'll try to make this as accessible as possible. And with that out of the way, let's jump in. Part 1. Where is Sargon coming from? Okay, let's just start with one of Sargon's bigger points. So in his video, Sargon looks at what Anita Sarkeesian says about the game Double Dragon, and he sees that her read of the game, as something where men have and exert power, and where the one female character is an object through which power is expressed, is fair enough. It's not some foreign thing that she's picking up out of nowhere.
Sure, you can say that the woman is not an actor in the story. She is the subject of the object of the story. And it is the men who are the actors, the subjects, who are working their way, fighting their way through, hordes of enemies in order to save her.
What Sargon disagrees with, however, is how these things should be framed. Where Anita looks at the game in terms of patriarchy, Sargon cites the normal person, who reads the game as a simple story about love and heroism. And while he thinks both interpretations are reasonable-ish, he thinks the latter one is much better, mostly because it's reflective of the history of storytelling.
One way is interpreting.
I had my mic off for my whole little rant. Sorry about that. I was just giving Lonerbox Big Joel praise. Being a YouTube watching YouTuber. The depths that these conversations fascinating.
Interpreting it maliciously, and the other way is interpreting it, I guess, charitably, but the charitable interpretation is obviously how the designers of the game intended it. Because, I mean, it just fits into all of the heroic narratives that men have told one another since the dawn of time.
As Sargon says later on, there is no objective interpretation to art, and so there's no reason why we should favor Anita's interpretation over any other.
There is no universal meaning to art. That's the problem, in fact, with critiquing art, isn't it?
Now, what is Carl doing with this argument? Well, he's trying to prove his point by introducing a false dichotomy. See, when Anita Sarkeesian read Double Dragon the way she did, she never made the claim that that was the only interpretation that could ever be applied to the text. And luckily for us, Carl and Anita's interpretations do not contradict each other in any way. Like, sure, if you play Double Dragon, it's obviously true that the game is about heroism and romantic love. That, as Carl points out, it harkens back to ancient modes of storytelling. But you might notice, this fact does nothing but strengthen Anita Sarkeesian's claim here. Yes, Double Dragon does evoke things like chivalric romance. It's using a trope, the damsel in distress, that gets its name from these works of art. So what Anita Sarkeesian does is agree with this idea and then ask a question. What does this historic trope say about gender? What social vision does it come from? And the answer, something that Sargon agrees with, is that it comes from a culture that oppressed and subjugated women.
To be honest with you, a lot of history is sexist, so it's not like you can turn around and say that there's no validity to any of these claims.
That treated them as precious objects that lacked most forms of power and rights and needed to be protected by the empowered class, men. So what Carl says isn't an argument against Sarkeesian's perspective, rather, it's literally what she means when she says that Double Dragon contains regressive ideas.
Most recently, Double Dragon Neon in 2012 reintroduced new gamers to this regressive crap yet again.
The messages of the game regress to a historical moment where various harmful and artificial gender hierarchies were imposed by society. So, cool. If these two arguments don't contradict each other, and if they both seem pretty valid, then what is Sargon doing when he presents them as two mutually exclusive choices that battle against each other? Well, he's telling us his preferences. In short, he would rather think of the game as a simple story of love and heroism, and he would rather not think of the game in terms of gendered oppression. And that's weird to me because, okay, I think that's fine. Look, Sargon, I think this stuff is interesting and helpful, and I like to slurp it up. But I don't want to make you slurp it up. I couldn't do that even if I wanted to. And neither myself nor Anita Sarkeesian ever said something to the contrary of that. You can choose what media you like to consume, and you can choose how to consume it. Nobody's chasing after you with an Anita Sarkeesian hot take. But at the same time, this discussion of personal preference isn't related to the point I was making, is it? Whether or not you enjoy Anita's interpretation is a totally different question from whether or not that interpretation is reasonable or evidenced by the text. And you're responding to a video that talks about the latter question with points that only speak to the former. And that is the interesting trick that Sargon pulls here. Because it looks like he's talking about me. He plays a thing I said and he responds to it and all that stuff. But all he really does is present my and Sarkeesian's work in terms of his own ego. He doesn't disagree with the points in front of him because they lack merit. In fact, the entire concept of merit is posed as illusory and unimportant in this conversation.
There is no universal meaning to art. That's the problem, in fact, with critiquing art, isn't it?
Rather, he disagrees with them because he wills them to be untrue. In his mind, Anita Sarkeesian is trying to express her will over us, and he's trying to express his, and whoever wins that battle is correct about the game Double Dragon. The media itself, the number of meanings we can get from it, couldn't be less important. And as we watch Sargon's video, we can see that every moment of it surrounds this fixation on will and power, that it permeates the entire work. For instance, Carl says at one point that he's only interested in challenging Anita's most ludicrous claim, that video games cause literal increases to violence against women.
I don't care about your value judgments about my opinion of the interpretation of data that shows that Anita Sarkeesian's assertions that video games are making us more violent towards men or women is just not true.
But here's the thing, she never said that. He's transparently lying, and he repeats this lie a few times in the video. She was always the one saying that the effects of media are subtle and complex. That was enough for her.
Likewise, engaging with these games is not going to magically transform players into raging sexists. We typically don't have a monkey see, monkey do direct cause and effect relationship with the media we consume. Cultural influence works in much more subtle and complicated ways.
And he was the one who cared about murder rates.
But it concludes that video games can increase aggressive cognition and aggressive behaviour. But that does not, for some reason, translate into an increase in violent crime. So what's the problem?
And when I pointed this out on Twitter, he just responded, then there is literally no reason to care about her analysis. And it's like, okay, then there is literally no reason why you should care about her work. That's fine. I mean, for me, that doesn't make any sense at all. I think there are plenty of reasons to care about behavior and society that go beyond violent acts. You might call me something of a utilitarian. I generally think that actions that increase pleasure and decrease harm are good, and I care about people doing them even when they're not busy murdering. But okay, he doesn't care about this stuff. I don't know why he lied, but his preferences are noted. And that's all he felt the need to express here, his preferences. The imposition of his identity and taste is the only argument he felt he needed to make. Or let's look at one more argument-based example. At one point during this section, Sargon says this:
Nobody is saying that video games cannot be harmful. I mean, there are people who have died playing video games because they were playing for too long. There's obviously the capacity for video game addiction. But the question is, are they in and of themselves the problem, or is it something regarding them? Can these things be enjoyed responsibly? And the answer is, of course they can.
So, watching this, I thought it was kind of absurd. I mean, there are all sorts of questions about the impact of art that aren't chained to the idea that people can't consume it responsibly. And here's a spicy one. Does the media in question tend to cultivate certain behaviors and dispositions? Like, you watch an ad on TV for a delicious all-you-can-eat shrimp buffet, and you love shrimp, so you reasonably think to yourself, I want to go to that restaurant. I want to get those tasty shrimp inside of me. But then, as you're walking to the Chuck E. Cheese's, excited to have your fill, you open up your phone and see an article from the New York Times. Acclaimed shrimp buffet only serves the butt of the shrimp. They only serve the anus. You put your phone in your pocket and walk home, disgusted. Now, looking at this hypothetical, we can see that the shrimp ad had a clear effect on this guy's behavior. It literally made him want to go out and do a thing. And this effect doesn't become unimportant just because this guy is a rational actor who, upon seeing another piece of media, responsibly changed his mind. The ad worked. That's interesting on the face of it. And besides, not everybody's going to have access to this New York Times article. People are going to go to this Chuck E. Cheese's because of the ad under the false pretense that they're about to get the full shrimp body and not just the ain. And isn't that worthy of investigation too? Well, no. Sargon is the question police. He gets to decide which questions are and are not worthy of our time. And he has decreed that the only thing we should talk about is a thing with an obvious answer.
Can these things be enjoyed responsibly? And the answer is, of course they can.
Again, the parameters of this conversation, as well as the process through which we decide what is true and untrue, is dictated only by Carl's preference. His ego is the argument. And what's kinda interesting is that when we look at Sargon's video through this lens, we can see that various things he does that appear silly are in fact really essential to what's going on here. Like, why is he constantly pausing my video while I'm just recapping his arguments so that he can say, yes, and those are very good arguments? To the skeptics and anti-SJWs, she's seen in all ways as a force for bad. A dishonest critic, an opportunist, a scam artist, an ideologue, a huge dick.
Yeah, but all of those things are actually demonstrable, so why wouldn't we say them?
The entire premise of the series that she got feminists to give her $160,000 to explore would be bullshit.
Thunderfoot makes a good point, doesn't he?
But so what?
Well, so what?
We all already know he thinks they're good arguments. That's why I'm portraying them accurately and making a response to them. Now, his job is to respond to that response, right? Not just unnecessarily repeat himself. Or why, in the first minutes of his video, does he go out of his way to say that I only like Anita Sarkeesian because I'm not well served by masculinity?
Anita Sarkeesian seems to generally hate the concept of masculinity, and you don't look like you're very well served by the concept of masculinity. So I can believe that you think she makes good points.
Isn't that a bit cringy and disingenuous to reduce the arguments of an objectively hot troubadour to how hot you think he is? Or, and here's my favorite, why does he pause my video when I say that science isn't capable of disproving that media affects people? I don't think that science is actually capable of disproving obvious facts about the way people work. Claim that whatever I'm about to say is some religious, feelings-based nonsense.
It's your subjective interpretation that you are going to refer to here, not someone else's. There is nothing objective about what you're going to say because you've just dismissed science.
Watch further and then pause and say, well, obviously media is the sort of thing that affects people, and that's not the sort of thing that science can disprove.
Well, brilliant. Yes, there is an effect on my body and brain when I consume media. But that effect is not to make someone violent.
After all, we have our sense data and memory and history to objectively prove that claim. So, which is it? Am I not the anti-scientific religious left that you want me to be? Or are we just advocates of the same religion? I don't know. When I first saw these things in Sargon's video, I thought they felt sort of desperate. Like, he knew he didn't have a lot of arguments against what I said, so he had to supplement his work with a bunch of guff that doesn't actually accomplish anything. But ultimately, these sorts of tactics that Sargon employs aren't some incidental part of his video. Rather, they are simply doing the only thing he cares about doing. He needs to nag us over and over that he thinks his past positions are good, because his thinking they're good and saying it a lot makes him appear stronger. He needs you to know that I only like Sarkeesian because I'm a beta male, because he's only concerned with power, and so it's relevant that he thinks I don't have this form of power. He needs you to think that I'm some religious, irrational man, even if he has to contradict that 30 seconds later, because it's not me being that way that matters, it's just him saying it, you hearing it, that counts. These actions are all fundamentally the same as looking at the game Double Dragon, seeing two interpretations that are both perfectly reasonable and don't contradict each other, and telling us, you have to choose one or the other. And there is no objective way to make that decision, so you should choose the one that I care about. The will to be right is what makes him right. Part 2. Where is Sargon going? So, there's a word that's been coming up again and again in this video, that we've been sort of dancing around this whole time. The word is care, or to be more precise, the lack of care. And it's a word that Sargon seems to be obsessed with. We can see it in the opening moments of his video, Why are we still talking about Anita Sarkeesian? Nobody cares anymore.
Honestly, I don't really know why we're doing this. Who cares about Anita Sarkeesian? Her channel is dead.
And from there, it becomes a sort of mantra, repeated by Sargon over and over and over again. He doesn't care about my religion. He doesn't care about harm that doesn't take the form of violence. He doesn't care about Anita Sarkeesian.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm not religious, and I don't really care about her religion, and I don't care about her opinion on the things that I enjoy. If the answer is to get more women into video games, I don't give a fuck how many women are in video games. I just don't care. Let's assume that every critique of Anita Sarkeesian's was completely true. Well, okay, why? Why do we care? So, no, I don't care about her opinion. It's just her saying, I don't like it. And I don't care if she doesn't like it.
So, I find the constant repetition of this phrase, unreasonably interesting. It's honestly why I decided to make this video in the first place. Because, if taken on face value, his saying, I don't care, is almost ridiculous. For one thing, that claim doesn't really have any substance, does it? It's not evidence that anybody's incorrect, it just functions as an end to the conversation. The point after which nothing you could say, right or wrong, could possibly mean anything to the person you're talking to. But more than that, this statement would be almost incomprehensible in any similar context. Imagine Carl made a response to my Shark Tale video, and every 10 seconds he paused to say, "Why are you talking about this 15-year-old movie? Who cares?" Yeah, that is something that a lot of people wouldn't be interested in. But the contract we sign as we enter Shark Tale discourse is that it's the sort of thing we want to talk about. And if you don't want to sign that contract, you should probably leave the conversation to the people who do. Carl here is just the kid who wanted to play laser tag with his classmates, only to complain the entire afternoon that lasers are boring. Why did you come to my birthday party, dude? You don't like me, you don't like the thing we're doing, and you could have literally done anything else with your time. But what this sort of understanding fails to recognize is that Carl not caring and talking about not caring over and over isn't just really important to this video, it's also the logical and necessary conclusion of everything we've been talking about. When your entire way of seeing, the way you decide a good argument from a bad one, comes to you through the assertion of your power and will, any attention or care that you pay to the opposition represents a chink in your armor. To care about Anita Sarkeesian or any of this stuff would be to acknowledge that these things are worthy of concern. And if he did that, his argument could not revolve around his ego and preference anymore. He would have to sign the contract, to engage with the subject matter, to give his input on the questions we've decided to invest our time in. And this, I think, is the real tragedy of Sargon of Akkad. Because, let me let you in on a little secret, a common observation that you've probably been thinking this whole time. Carl Benjamin does care about this. I mean, I'm not a mind reader, I don't know what's going on inside his head, but he sure does spend a lot of time listening to Sarkeesian and to me, and coming up with responses and disagreeing. Anita was the first subject Sargon ever made a video about. She was the first person who made him want to say something on the internet and be heard. He's made many videos about Gamergate. In one, he talks about how important this stuff is to him. The guy expresses a lot of care in his work. And what I kind of find sad about this is isn't that a good or at least reasonable thing to do? I know I care about Anita Sarkeesian's videos and care about what Sargon says. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made my video in the first place. But also, why shouldn't we care? I understand that this stuff happened a few years ago, but is it so weird to devote some time to something that significantly changed our culture? That helped draw the parameters of our extremely polarized internet? I know it might sound silly, but I think that Anita Sarkeesian and her critics are a big part of our online history. But Sargon can't just be okay with caring about this. It's impossible for him. He wants to be a part of this conversation, to express his thoughts on the internet. But he's put himself in this paradoxical position where the only way to engage is by disengaging. I care about this subject and want to prove I'm right, but the only way I can do that is by showing that me caring, anybody caring, is dumb. I am here now only because I don't want to be. And this position really hits its peak toward the end of Sargon's video. So, in my video, I argue that we need to be able to criticize the messages of art, not based upon their impact on society, but based on the quality of the message alone. And to help me prove my points, I talk about a hypothetical Nazi propaganda film, Lubenschluben, that has no demonstrable impact on society, but which we must be able to criticize anyway, because it advocates Nazism. And I'll put everything I said about Lubenschluben on the screen right now, so that you can just read it if you didn't see the original video. Now, there's two main ways that Sargon tries to get around this point. The first thing he says is just really strange, and even though it's not like part of the thesis of this video, I figured it would be best to talk about it anyway. No, Carl says, Lubenschluben isn't dangerous, and there's no reason to reject it based upon its harmful message, since in this society, nobody's doing something bad because of it, since it doesn't convince people to become Nazis.
Then Lubenschluben is not a dangerous work of art. It might do a really great job of showing Nazis exactly what they want to hear. In fact, it might just be exactly like a feminist frequency video critiquing video games. It might, in fact, be turning the entire world anti-feminist, but really pander and really stimulate feminist sensibilities.
This supposedly acts as evidence for the later claim that any moral critique of art is ungrounded, a mirage. You may think that you can talk about the worth of art from a political or moral perspective, but in fact, that's just a mirage.
Yes.
But, see, this is the sort of logic that would make a robot's head explode. Because, yes, I fully agree that within this society, Lubenschluben is not dangerous. But it is only not dangerous now because people have already recognized that the movie contains bad ideas. To put this another way, Carl is arguing that there is no merit in condemning this film's ideology because people have already condemned it. But now we have to ask, how did people condemn it in the first place? Did they cite some social harm it was doing? Well, no, they couldn't have, because in the end, no harm was done by the movie. Rather, they just looked at the message of the film and rightly concluded that it was a bad one. This here is the distinction between harmful ideas and harmful actions. Where harmful actions cause material damage to real people, harmful ideas can only cause damage if people want to pursue them. And it's good to advocate against harmful ideas specifically because we don't want them to materialize in the real world. That's like the best thing about freedom of speech, isn't it? That as a society, we can sort the harmful ideas from the helpful ones simply by talking to each other freely about it. But anyway, that was all very complicated and long, and I could honestly write a whole video about the intricacies of it, but it's the second thing that Sargon says that I really care about.
You're not giving it a storytelling critique or any other kind of critique that you could apply to a work of art. No, you're giving it a political critique, which is entirely dependent on your own political bias, which is, again, once we come back to, yes, people who like it are going to like it because they already happen to believe it, because it already plays into their biases, but anyone who doesn't already have that bias, who's looking for actual harm done by this Nazi propaganda film, might find nothing. In the same way that I don't believe the actual harm done by feminist frequency videos it amounts to anything either. It's exactly the same process, with you and feminism as your hypothetical Nazis and Lüben Schluben.
And it's not bad because somebody might become a Nazi when they see it. No, it's bad because it advocates bad things.
This is your value judgment, and honestly, if you can say this about your hypothetical film, then I can say this about Anita Sarkeesian's critiques.
Wow, just listen to that. That is just your political bias speaking. And if you can say that about Nazi propaganda, why can't I say the same about feminist frequency videos? Carl, look what my video has done to you. See, I thought you cared about facts and evidence and reason. I thought you thought that patriarchy doesn't exist in modern Western culture, that feminism is stupid, and so it's silly to want media to reflect that ideology. At the end of the day, I really thought that's what you believed. But the minute somebody points out that we should be able to criticize media on its moral worth, the entire house of cards comes toppling down, doesn't it? No, he says, you are not able to ground your critiques in anything rational. And you know what? Neither can I. You hate Nazi ideology for some arbitrary reason. I hate feminist ideology for some arbitrary reason. And the only difference between your idea and mine is that mine is stronger. And the people who disagree are probably not well served by masculinity. And we can do what we want and we don't have to care what they say. And besides, aren't we both entitled to our political bias? Well, yes, Carl. If you want my permission, you can have it. Believe whatever you want. But the next time you want to make a political assertion, the next time you want to decry Patreon for hating free speech, the next time you want to say that Muslim people are dangerous, the next time you want to say that your video games are worthy of protection, that they are a moral good, I want everybody to remember this. Remember the way that you were willing to sacrifice yourself and your entire perspective to say that you think Anita Sarkeesian's videos are bad for no real reason at all. You were willing to do all that just so you could keep being King Baby, sitting on a big throne in a moral wasteland where nothing matters or even exists except for what you want. So, that was all I had to say about this stuff. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that it's my first and last response video. If you liked it, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and give money to my Patreon. And also be sure to come to my charity stream. I'll be playing Getting Over It 50 times for the Christchurch shooting. That should be a somber occasion. Anyway, now it's time for my Patreon question of the video. Emily Ilfelder asks, if you couldn't be making video essays, what would you do? Well, I would want to do something with writing, you know. Growing up, I wanted to be a sketch comedian, or a short story writer, or a screenwriter, or anything like that. But beyond that, you know, if I couldn't do anything involving writing, I have no idea. You know, I can't remember a time where I didn't want to be a writer. Anyway, that's the end. Bye. I love you. What?
The Amazon rainforest is the largest rainforest in the world. This extraordinary tropical jungle is roughly the same size as 48 states in the US. The Amazon surrounds the Amazon River and its many tributaries. The Amazon River is the largest river in the world by volume discharged. It stretches an astounding 4,225 miles from the peaks of the Peruvian Andes to the beautiful beaches of Brazil. Scientists estimate there are 390 billion trees in the Amazon rainforest, including over 16,000 species. If we include shrubs, climbing plants, algae, and fungi, the number of species climbs well over 40,000, but there are many more species waiting to be discovered. Plants, algae, and fungi represent just a fraction of the Amazon's ecological diversity. The Amazon supports at least 427 mammal species, 3,000 species of freshwater fish, over 1,300 species of birds, 378 types of reptiles, and 400 species of amphibians. Notice how we didn't mention any invertebrates, like insects and arachnids. That's because the Amazon's gargantuan population of invertebrate species climbs well into the millions. And that only includes the species we've identified so far. But how does this gigantic ecosystem support so many diverse organisms? Scientists conceptualize the Amazon as 4 ecological layers: the forest floor, the understory, the canopy, and the overstory. Each layer plays an important role in the health and survival of the rainforest. The forest floor is where the rainforest finds its humble beginnings. The roots of towering trees grow in thick, low-nutrient soil laid over a layer of volcanic rock. Without deep, rich soil, the forest floor's tropical vegetation depends on decomposers, like bacteria, fungi, and insects. These essential organisms pull nutrients from dead organic material, like leaves, wood, and animal carcasses. Vital for nutrient cycling, vibrant mushrooms like the scarlet cup and the veiled lady adorn the forest floor. Some of these fungi are bioluminescent. When the sun sets over the Amazon, these radiant mushrooms illuminate the forest floor like magical nightlights. Very little sunlight penetrates the upper layers of the rainforest, so the forest floor remains dark and damp year-round. Low levels of light make life challenging for plant species on the forest floor, but this layer is ideal for terrestrial animals. On the forest floor, you'll discover spectacular insects like the assassin bug, which impales its prey with a long, sharp proboscis. Other extraordinary insects hide in plain sight, like leaf mimic katydids, which disguise their tall green bodies as rainforest vegetation. The Amazon rainforest is home to many of the world's largest insects and arachnids. The titan beetle, for example, can grow up to 6.6 inches long. That's about the size of an adult human hand. With such an astonishing population of invertebrates, there are predators aplenty. Reptiles like iguanas and mammals like the giant anteater feed on huge colonies of ants and termites on the forest floor. Hanging no more than 12 feet above the forest floor, the second layer of the Amazon rainforest is the understory. The understory is populated by small trees, shrubs, and parasitic climbing plants. Like the forest floor, the understory is permanently shaded by a dense canopy. There are only a few species of flowering plants in the understory. These plants attract pollinators with large, brightly colored blooms. Though it lacks direct sunlight, the understory produces a variety of edible fruits, including mangoes, lemons, and cacao pods, which are used to make chocolate. The understory also houses an abundance of incredible animals. Giant waxy tree frogs live and feed on the understory's low-hanging branches. Colonies of vampire bats hide in the sun-starved corners of the forest in well-structured family groups. But one of the understory's most spectacular residents lurks in the undergrowth. The jaguar is the largest cat species in the Americas and an apex predator in the Amazon. Jaguars are confident swimmers with powerful jaws. Camouflaged amongst rainforest vegetation, these big cats hunt larger prey like deer, monkeys, and tortoises. Rising above the understory, the rainforest canopy is the thickest layer of vegetation in the Amazon. This labyrinth of leaves and branches shields the understory and the forest floor. It keeps the lower layers damp and humid, while protecting them from dry winds and harsh sunlight. To humans, this is the most inaccessible layer of rainforest. Scientists expect to discover the most species in the rainforest canopy, but exploring the canopy is a challenge all its own. The canopy receives ample sunlight, so delicate flowering plants grow safely inside. The canopy's flora sustains a wide variety of animal species with their flowers and fruits. Beyond reptiles and thousands of insect species, who could forget the canopy's most rambunctious population? Monkeys thrive in this complex network of vegetation where they hide from apex predators. Spider monkeys, howler monkeys, capuchins, tamarins, and many more enjoy the canopy's fruits, nuts, and seeds. The canopy's most impressive populations wear coats of colorful feathers. A majority of the Amazon's birds live in the canopy, including some of the world's rarest species. The long-billed toucan, the ragged-crested hoatzin, and a variety of macaws fill the Amazon's canopy with music and color. The emergent layer, also known as the overstory, is the fourth and final layer of the Amazon rainforest. Trees in the overstory grow up to 200 feet tall. Their massive trunks penetrate the canopy into the open air, where their branches spread wide, like umbrellas hanging over the forest below. The overstory is bright and dry, housing many large avian predators. Birds of prey like eagles, owls, and hawks nest in the tallest trees, where they prey on animals in the canopy, like macaws and monkeys. Scientists divide the Amazon into ecological layers, but this vast habitat functions as one cohesive system. Each species has evolved to fill a specific niche, from the darkest corners of the forest floor to the tallest treetops, 200 feet above the ground. It has taken millions of years for this ecological tapestry to grow and develop, but the Amazon is threatened now more than ever before. 20% of the Amazon rainforest has already been destroyed, and deforestation rates are at a 12-year high. At the rate we're going, the world's greatest terrestrial ecosystem may collapse and disappear completely. If the Amazon disappears, we will see increasing deficits in local rainfall. That means drier air, savanna-like conditions, and frequent shortages of water. By destroying millions of trees, an excess of carbon will also accelerate global climate change, eradicating plant and animal species around the world. The Amazon rainforest protects its millions of inhabitants, but it also preserves the health and balance of our global ecosystem. To the untrained eye, the Amazon is a sprawling mess of trees, vines, and strange creatures. But if you look inside its tangled canopy, you'll discover a life-giving ecosystem unlike any in the world.
I can do an interview if you want. I'm not, but I can do an interview if you want. Do you have a question?
Yeah, what brings you guys out here? Do these look like tortured animals?
Well, it's irrelevant if they look like tortured animals now. They're still going to be killed, aren't they? And if you look at them, a lot of them are emaciated and they've hardly got any grass to feed on because the grass has been shredded so low. So I'd argue even though they're in a field, it's not a very good condition for a cow to be in. And it's irrelevant what conditions they're kept in because they're still going to be slaughtered unnecessarily, aren't they?
They don't really look emaciated to me.
Well, you can see.
As far as I can see, and I'm assuring you that they probably are also fed grains, as most cattle are in the United States.
But I would also say that that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter what life they give, and they're still going to be slaughtered. And I'd ask you, how do you justify taking their life if it's unnecessary?
Well, what I would say is, how do you justify banning meat across the whole population? Are you talking about banning meat in America or globally?
What we're asking is, we're not asking about banning something, we're asking people to make more conscious and ethical choices, which is reducing their consumption and eliminating their consumption themselves. It's not about us banning something, because we realise it's probably very impossible to ban something, but if we encourage people to stop their consumption, then naturally the amount that it's raised and produced will be dropped until it's no longer relevant in society.
Let me ask you, what moral code are you using to say that it's wrong to kill animals for meat?
The same moral code that we have towards each other, which is that we're alive, that we suffer, that we have pain, and that we want to live. And because of that, we realize that we shouldn't harm each other. Now, the animals are alive, they're sentient, they're conscious, they can feel pain, they can suffer just like us, which is why I use the same moral code, which is just let them live if we can, which of course we can. So,
would you say that you're using the same code when you say that we shouldn't kill each other, to apply that to not killing animals?
I think it's not necessarily about it being the same code, it's just the fact that we don't have to do these things, and because we don't have to, there's no moral justification for it because it's unnecessary. So it's no matter what species the form takes, if we don't have to, then we shouldn't, you know?
So let's talk about you know, the plan and aspect of if you were to try to move toward a veganism diet for the entire global population.
Right.
How would that be sustainable? And you know, as far as what we've seen regarding agriculture use in with plants, vegetables, crops, and everything like that, are you aware that the amount of arid land, farmable land that we have in this country couldn't necessarily sustain everyone in the world having a vegan diet?
But that's not actually true, because the majority of the crops that we grow, we feed to livestock animals that it is. And in fact, all the grain that's used in this country alone could feed 800 million humans, which means we could eradicate world hunger with just the grain that's fed to animals in this country alone. So the sustainability issue is kind of a non-issue when it comes to a to a vegan lifestyle, because veganism is the only way we can live sustainably with our planet, because a non-vegan diet is destroying our environment in so many different ways.
We know that look, I've done a lot of research into veganism.
Yeah,
okay?
sure, as have I.
And I don't knock you guys for being vegans. I think it's a personal choice.
Right.
But what I would say is we do both know that you cannot just live off of grains. You have to have a well-balanced diet if you're trying to be a vegan. You have to have lots of greens, fruits, and a plethora. And a lot of those, the produce items that you guys live off are actually more tropical, like bananas, mangoes, papayas, things like that. So what about the impact that you would be having on these other nations that you would be having to transport, you know, using more oil and more fossil fuels, and the impact that that would have on the environment? Do you take into effect how that would have an impact on our environment?
Well, I think you raise a good issue, but the point is, in America alone, there's so many crops and so many fruits and vegetables that are grown here that we wouldn't necessarily need to import lots of vegetables and fruits from abroad. Yes, of course, some are, but we wouldn't necessarily need to up the intake of those that we produce from abroad. We could just up the intake of those that we produce here. So you could still get all the nutrients you need, but from fruits, vegetables, crops and grains that you produce in this country. And if you want to talk about crops and grains being transported from other countries, a lot of what these cows are fed is soy, GMO soy, that's grown in places like Brazil and South America, where huge amounts of the Amazon is destroyed to make way for the soybean plantations. So, you know, when we look at sustainability again, it's still much more sustainable and environmentally conscious to be vegan than non-vegan.
Well, you know, if you want to talk about feeding cattle grains, right? And how that's not sustainable. Well, I will agree to an extent in that regard with you, but we both also know that the cattle weren't meant to be eating those grains. They're meant to be eating grass. They're actually healthier when they're grass-fed. And that's why there's a premium on grass-fed meat. People want to consume grass-fed meat. It's healthier. The meat's healthier, the animal's healthier. So if you want to look at sustainability, okay, we could talk about if you had grass-fed cows, well, you couldn't complain about deforestation from grain produce, but if you're still wanting to talk about, okay, let's switch everyone to a vegan diet, well, you would have to use virtually all of the arable cropland in the entire world to try to feed and sustain our current global population, and that doesn't account for if our population increases. So are you essentially pushing for globalism, because you'd have to have a global community all organized and working together to try to accomplish that goal? The question is, are you promoting globalism?
So we'll start from the beginning. So the grass-fed beef one's an interesting one. Now the reason that we don't always have grass-fed beef is because there's simply not the space. To have grass-fed beef requires loads more space, which would take even more land, which we don't have.
But no, it wouldn't require arable land. You can have grass-fed beef in land that is not farmable for vegetation.
But it still takes up that land.
Certain areas, but that land is actually more vast, and we actually have way more of it than we do farmable land.
But it still takes up that land, and the issue of cows is all the methane gas emissions that they produce. Now, the animal agriculture enterprise is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation system combined. So say let's eliminate Amazon rainforest destruction, it's still terrible for our environment due to the greenhouse gas emissions that are put into our environment because of methane.
We all know that the dinosaurs actually produced way more methane gas, and it didn't end up
you're climate skeptics,
killing
aren't you?
the Earth. Okay? So the Earth is fine.
But the issue is
talk about not destroying farmable, not destroying forests and habitat. If you wanted to essentially switch to veganism, well, what would you end up having to do? You'd end up having to mow down more forests in arable land to plant vegetable fields.
Well, we're already growing enough food to feed between 10 and 12 billion people, but the food that we grow, we feed to the livestock animals in the first place. The land is there. We just have to change what we're producing on that land, or at least change where that food is going on the land that's produced, or where the crops are produced. So 82% of starving children live in countries where food is grown to feed livestock animals in the West. So the countries that need that food most are the ones that are growing it, but then we're taking off them to feed to the cows and chickens and sheep and every animal that we eat in this country and indeed across the West in general. So the argument again, it's kind of a non-argument because the food's already been grown and the land is already there. We could reduce the amount of land that we need to use through growing plants alone, because humans consume a lot less plants than cows and pigs do.
But I'd like to get some clarification or explanation from you on.
Yeah, sure.
Is how would you be able to not use any animal byproducts at all, even when it comes to agriculture? You use fertilizers that come from blood, bone, feces of animals. So even when you think you're not playing a role in animals being used or killed or exploited, well, every time you're eating your vegetables, those vegetables were grown with animal fertilizer. So without animal fertilizer, if you get rid of the entire animal industry, how would you then grow your plants?
So the thing is, the reason that we use manure and animal fertilizer is because we have so much of it, right? And a lot of it's put into our rivers, into our streams, into our fields, and it pollutes and kills a lot of wildlife.
But it's also highly fertile and effective.
Of course it is, but there are other alternatives that we can use, other nitrate-rich substances that we can use instead. So the issue isn't necessarily that we'll be able to produce these foods, because we still would. We just find another alternative that wasn't manure, because the only reason we use the manure is because we have so much of it because of all the animals that we raise. So there's always an alternative to that.
That's not the only reason we use it. It's because there's a symbiotic relationship between all plants and all nature and the whole cycle of life. It's not the only reason just because it's available. It's because it's what we've been using for a very long time.
But there are alternatives in place that we can use instead that would be just as effective for doing it.
Are you talking about plant compost?
Yeah, plant compost would be good. We could use.
Well, how do you produce the plants? Like, what I'm saying is, when you go to the store and you buy your plant compost, a lot of the plants that were used in the plant compost were grown with meat fertilizers. So wouldn't that disrupt the entire cycle if you were to completely remove animals from the mix?
But it's going to be such a gradual change over a long period of time. We'll have a long time to adjust into that. It's not an overnight thing where, like, okay, well, there's no more animal fertilizer, let's just use this plant fertilizer instead. It's going to be such a gradual shift that we'll be able to change accordingly as that shift continues. So it's never going to be like, oh my God, what are we going to do today? Because we'll have many, many years or even decades to kind of figure that out and slowly change it as the system changes.
And the other thing is, in the agriculture process, crude oil and fossil fuels are heavily used.
So they are,
You have in every aspect of the process with industrial farming. You've got the processing, harvesting, you've got fertilizing, every aspect, pesticide control, everything. They are using tons of fossil fuel, especially with transportation. There's been studies and research out there that's indicated that veganism, and if everyone in the United States were to adopt a vegan diet, that it would actually have a major impact on a lot of these other nations. For example, in some South American countries where avocados and quinoa is produced, it's driven up the price for the natives there to where they can't even afford foods grown in their own native environment. Do you feel like the vegan diet is truly a sustainable, reasonable solution?
I think it's an interesting point that you raise, and I don't think by any stretch of the imagination a vegan world will cure all of the world's ills, because we've got so many other situations of oppression, injustice, and kind of corruption in place. And the issue that you describe isn't an issue with veganism, it's an issue with the economic and socio-political system that we have in general. So that isn't necessarily a criticism of what a vegan world would look like. But as I say, it's not going to cure all the world's problems, but what it will do is it'll create a system that is more sustainable. There's always more sustainable steps we can continue to take, reducing our carbon footprint in other ways. But it's the single biggest thing or the single smallest thing we can do that has the biggest impact is going vegan. And all these other issues we do have to address, single-use plastic, greenhouse gas emissions from other sources, absolutely, crude oil use, but it's such a pivotal and significant thing that we can do that'll have such a huge impact.
Did you know that it's estimated that around 300 animals, that includes groundhogs, rodents, birds, animals in the wild or in agricultural settings, are killed per 1 acre of agriculturally farmed land that is for vegetable production. So around 300 animals are killed when you do a farm agriculturally per acre. That's actually more than per acre of animals that are killed with cattle raised land, with cattle farmed land. So to say that you're not participating in the killing of animals is unrealistic to think that we're not playing any role, regardless if you eat vegan or regardless if you eat meat.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you. Like I'm the first to admit, if you ask me, that yeah, small animals like rodents and small birds and stuff die in the production of crops. That's an unfortunate situation they're in. But for the most part, if you think about it, it takes up to 16 kilograms of plants to produce 1 kilogram of animal products, which means that vastly more plants are used in the production of animal products, which means that vastly more acres of land are used in the production of animal products, which means that vastly more small animals like rodents and little birds and mice and stuff are killed in the production of animal products generally. So even as a vegan, I know I am responsible for those animals being killed on some level, but the fact is it's still less animals, and it's about that intentional killing. When we go into a supermarket, we buy steak, bacon, eggs, dairy, whatever it is, we're consciously and intentionally paying for an animal to die on our behalf when we don't have to. We have to eat something, and we have to eat plants.
Okay, so what's your plan? Okay, you guys say you want to shut down farms like this that have cattle and pigs and chickens. What happens to those animals? You do realize that those animals have been bred in a certain way to be used for us domestically. The chicken today is nothing like the original fowl that we took from the forest and bred and made fatter and bigger and less capable of escaping from predators. So how long do you actually think a chicken will last in a wild if you just released it?
They won't, but the thing is, right, as the world shifts to veganism, it will be a gradual shift, which means that the number of animals that we breed will obviously reduce accordingly as the number of vegans rises, because farmers aren't going to breed animals they know they can't sell.
So the animals will just disappear.
Right, well, so the animals that we breed, the ones that, as you rightfully admitted yourself, are natural animals who can't survive without our help, will disappear. But what that'll allow is for this farmland that we have now to repopulate, for those natural ecosystems to replenish, which will allow natural wildlife to restock in those natural areas. So we can have wild roaming deer, wild roaming boar, wild roaming, all the birds and everything that are on the brink of extinction can come back in these land areas that we decimated for agriculture. So the animals that we bred unfairly and disgustingly to die at 6 weeks old.
But if you're going to create more agriculture, how are you going to then not... Like, what you're saying is, okay, we decimated those lands for agriculture.
For animal agriculture.
Animals, right? Yeah. But we also would need to create more land for agriculture if we're having to feed humans without meat, because currently we do rely on a large portion of our diet for meat. You know that. Americans mostly eat meat. So we would actually have to mow down way more animal habitat in order to feed ourselves.
But like I said before, we're currently growing enough food to feed between 10 and 12 billion people globally, and the grain alone in this country, America, that we feed to livestock animals could feed 800 million other humans, which is just about the number of people that are living in a state of starvation. So actually, it's not true we could use less land, and we're already growing enough crops because cows and pigs eat way more food than we eat on a daily basis.
Well, the grain, like I said before, you can't live off the grain.
Right, but the wheat and the corn and the soy.
Humans aren't even meant to eat that much grain. It's very unhealthy for ourselves. So you would have to look into what types of, you'd have to have a balanced diet, and like I said, a lot of that comes from tropical regions. A lot of that stuff, the mangoes, papayas, bananas, and the impact that it would have on those areas would be pretty big, wouldn't you say?
But it doesn't have to come from those areas. Yeah, we're going to import some fruits and some vegetables and some grain stuff from those areas, which is good for the economy in many senses, but we don't have to produce all of our, or to get all of our fruits and vegetables from those areas. We can grow them here. So the places that we're currently growing all the wheat and the soy and the corn and the barley and the maize for animals, we can totally take that down and grow the foods that we want to eat instead there, because the land is there, the farmers have that land, they can shift the agriculture, what they're producing.
That implies that all farmland is equal, and
it's not. It's not.
There are areas where you can grow grain and corn, and you cannot grow other vegetables.
Absolutely.
And you would have to import tons and tons of different soil and amendments, and it's just not practical and not reasonable.
Right.
So to say that all farmland is equal is a problem.
I never said that all farmland was equal. I admit that many farmland is not equal, and some grains you can produce on some farmland and some you can't in others. But like I said before, the shift to veganism is going to be gradual, so these little bumps in the road that we're discussing can be solved over a long period of time and sustainable. Yes, there are always going to be sustainability issues in the way that we live. We can never eradicate the sustainability issues that we have.
You know, research and studies have shown that actually the most sustainable and healthy for the environment and healthy for even humans diet is actually an omnivore diet, where you do have vegetables, plants, and you also do have meat. Now, we
I would
both
be interested
agree
to see that
most
study.
Americans do eat too much meat, but we have, our ancestors ate meat. They found it in their teeth. They found it in their surroundings. They have cave drawings of us hunting meat. They have the tools that we use for hunting meat. So our ancestors have always eaten meat. If you want to argue through science and say we evolved from monkeys, well, monkeys are omnivores. They eat meat. And as far as the idea that, okay, well, you can't use a tool to be considered an omnivore, that's not necessarily true, because there are tons of animals out there that use tools to hunt and tools to obtain prey or advantages.
That's fine, the thing is, right, like just because our ancestors did something, why does that provide moral justification for what we do today? Our ancestors used to murder each other. They were very violent. So are we allowed to kill each other and be violent towards each other because our ancestors did? I mean, our morality is changing. As a species, we've evolved so much. We live in homes, we have cars, we fly in planes. Our ancestors never did that. So if you want to be purist in your logic like that, you should be living in a cave and squatting in the bushes to go to the toilet, right? But the fact is we don't do those things anymore because we've changed as a species. Now, it's irrelevant. Say we're biological omnivores, right? Irrelevant. Just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should. Now, we've evolved again so far.
But isn't it healthiest for us to do something that we've been doing for so long and that is in our history of our ancestors? And it's scientifically, if we're omnivores, we are opportunists. We're supposed to eat what we can get a hold of. And to have a diet that varies in different things, where we can get nutrients and fats and things from different sources.
So our bodies thrive on a plant-based diet. You're right, we're opportunistic in the sense that we eat what we have to survive. And what we had to survive back in the Ice Ages when those times of food scarcity was animals, of course. But we don't live in those times of food scarcity anymore, so we don't need to be opportunistic omnivores.
Because we have globalism and we have shipping. But let me ask you
this. We can farm crops like we do animals.
But let me ask you this.
Please.
Could you, if you had however many acreage of land for yourself, right? Without any animals, no animal fertilizer, no nothing, right? Could you plant and grow outside crops and sustain yourself throughout the cycles of the year, only growing native or localized seasonable crops, meaning no bananas, no mangoes, none of that stuff. That's not naturally grown here in Ohio.
Of course it's
not. You'd have to be living off of whatever's natural and can be grown in this environment, and you'd have to only have the seasonal window that we have here. If you actually were to sit there and examine that aspect here, you would realize that there's a reason why we ate meat, because we had winters. We didn't have refrigerators very much, so we couldn't, canning and storing wasn't as simple and easy as it is today. But
the thing is, you said it's not as simple as it is today, right? So it is simple today. We can live off different things. And to answer your question, I honestly don't know if I'd be able to do that. I know that a vegan diet on average requires a 16th the amount of land as an omnivorous diet does. But again, the issues you raise, I couldn't tell you what seasonal fruit and veg and if I could do it all year round. But I don't have to worry about that because we can sustainably live by getting foods from different parts of the country and from different states. We can get avocados from California and take them to Cleveland, and that's fine. And we can do that sustainably as well.
So basically you admit that the entire premise of veganism is based on having globalization.
I mean
globalism, essentially.
I mean, I know what InfoWars is like, and the topic of globalization is a scary word for you guys, and I appreciate that. But the issue of veganism is something that we would like to spread across the world just because it's a more compassionate and ethical way to live. And really, what would be the problem in doing that? Like I asked you before, what justification can we use to kill them if it's unnecessary? I mean, how do we morally justify taking that life?
Okay, let's talk about, because you keep bringing up morals and ethics.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
You do. But first I want to ask you right now, do you believe that humans are animals, or do you believe that we are sentient beings from God?
We're animals. I mean, even if you believe in the Bible, we're still animals.
Okay.
I mean,
so you believe that we're animals and they're animals, and there's virtually no difference between them and us?
I do believe that there's many differences between us and animals, but I think that what makes us alike is what's most important. The fact that we are alive, the fact that we are conscious, and the fact that we can feel pain. That's what unites us, right?
Okay, because what's curious is, I know that you're saying morals, right?
Yeah.
Morals and ethics. It's wrong to kill. It's wrong to kill a living other being. And I know that some of you may try to say that, oh, well, this is just naturally learned, but we've seen in other societies that no, not necessarily. That men have been killing men for a very long time. Men have been killing animals for a very long time. So where did we get these ethics and morals from? And what I will say is this: the majority of our ethics and morals that we have, at least in this country, right, and our Western civilization, is based on Judeo-Christian morals and principles. So if you're adhering and you're trying to use Christian morals and principles when you're talking about whether it's wrong or right to kill, but then also saying that you don't believe that we are from God and that we have certain consciousness abilities, how can you argue two separate points simultaneously that conflict with each other?
That's a good question. I believe that obviously morality in many senses is subjective in its purest form, although as humans we do have moral agency, and that's what kind of separates us from wild animals, although wild animals do demonstrate moral agency as well. Now let's put the issue of morality aside and let's look at social contracts, right? And we have a social contract with each other now not to harm each other. In fact, everyone in America, for the most part, has a social contract, which means that we adhere to not harming each other.
It's not necessarily a social contract. I would say it's legal. It has to do with our judicial system, which predates back to Christian Judeo principles.
Right.
Thou shalt not kill, that comes from Christian principles.
Right.
The reason we have it in Western society is because we adopted that because we actually were founded by Christian people.
But
That's what we were founded by.
The legal system always changes, right? Which means that morality is always changing along with the legal system. And, you know, people used to justify slavery using Christianity in the Bible, but of course we moved past that many years ago, thankfully, and realized that slavery is wrong, even though people use the Bible to justify something. So I think turning to religion or to a God to try and define how we should live is very dangerous, because people use the religion and God in very, you know, manipulative and deceptive ways.
Well, people can try to use morals and ethics in very manipulative ways as well.
Agreed. But what's manipulative about saying let's not harm others if we don't have to?
Because if you had a situation where you had to feed your family,
right,
I guarantee you're going to choose to kill that animal and feed your children, would you not?
But you're taking a survival situation, a time of necessity, and I've not at one point argued it's immoral to kill an animal in necessity. Every time I've answered your question, it's saying it's wrong to kill an animal when it's unnecessary.
But that's why humans have been doing it for so long. It's because we're doing it out of necessity. And it's what we needed to do to survive. We did it for health reasons. We did it to sustain ourselves, and to try and not acknowledge that would just be improper. And your whole argument that we can live on veganism is based on this new idea that we can have globalized agricultural systems, and it's really a huge feat and a big project, and it wouldn't be actually realistic or sustainable for many regions of the world.
But I would like to say I totally acknowledge what you're saying. I agree with you. Yeah, it was necessity, but the argument today and why veganism is rising today is because it's not a necessity any longer. So you're absolutely right, and I'm not being improper because I agree with you, right, on that point. So, and the issues that you raise, again, it comes back to this idea of it's going to be a gradual shift to veganism. And look, there's going to be bumps in the road. I'm not saying it's going to be a smooth transition and going vegan is going to answer all the world's problems. I'm going to admit that to you. Yeah. But being vegan is doing what's possible and practicable, right? And that's why I use the word necessity. But
I think veganism is a developed world luxury. You guys have the developed world luxury to live as vegans. But let's say this, people who are living in certain areas in Africa, you have tribes there that seriously live off of their cattle. They have cattle, and they have very respectful, loving relationships with their cattle. They milk them, they raise them, everything. They also use them and eat them for meat, and they're sacred to them. And in their areas, they do not have arable farmland. They could not live off of agricultural stuff. So them being able to exist and live would solely be based upon your globalist idea of farming all of the arable land, which would be most of Ohio would be turned into farms, okay? And then you'd have to ship it using tons of gasoline, which we can all talk about the environmental impact that would probably have to constantly shipping people food into other countries where they don't have arable land. And then the impact of what's that going to have to them as a community to all of a sudden switch from a heavily meat animal-based diet to then flip-flop to a vegan diet. Is that going to have an impact on their culture and on their society? So is it sustainable? I would say no, but I would say that it's a luxury that we have in this more developed world.
I would argue that point and say if you look at the poorest places in the world, and you look at the places where people live in extreme poverty, the majority of what they eat is grains and plants because it's the cheapest food to produce. Now, of course, there's going to be areas in the world where people have cattle and they take the milk because they need to survive. It comes down to the idea of necessity again,
A lot of the places in the world, the tribal people live off goats or sheep or cows.
And I'm not disputing that point, but the poorest country in the world, what they survive off mainly is a plant-based diet. Places in Africa like Nigeria and stuff like that, example, they have some of the lowest rates of heart disease globally. And interestingly, they have the highest rates of plant consumption because they can't afford to have animals, they can't afford to look after animals, and they can't afford to buy animal products. So actually the luxury is animal products because they're the most expensive food that we can buy. And the only reason they're so cheap in this country is because of the massive amount of tax subsidies. If you actually looked at the proper price that these products should be, no one, apart from the richest upper echelons of society, would be able to afford them. If you want to talk about privilege, then it's privilege to be able to afford animal products, whereas the cheapest foods you can buy on this planet, the beans, grains, legumes, the seasonal vegetables and fruits, are the absolute cheapest foods that we can buy.
Well, if you want to talk about, okay, so the whole agricultural push to Africa is a newer thing. They have not been able to do agriculture, and they've been living off their animals and in their environment. And
growing what they can naturally.
And growing what they can naturally. Right. To say that they've had big agriculture there for a long time is not necessarily
I've not
true.
said that. I've just said they grow what they can grow locally and what they can grow with the skills that they have. I've never said they have big agriculture. They just grow what they can afford to grow in that area.
But it's not, we can agree though, would we agree that a grain-based diet is not the healthiest diet for human?
It's better than animal-based diets. Because animal products cause our leading diseases and illnesses: heart disease, colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, hypertension, strokes. These are caused.
But do they? I don't.
Oh, they do.
You don't. What are you citing in that? Because here's the reality: is our ancestors had been consuming heavy meat and fat and bone marrow-based diets when they were hunting a very long time ago. It's evidence, and their bones were more dense. They had stronger jaws. They were bigger. They were taller. As soon as humans, if you look at it historically, as soon as humans switched to agriculture, their bones became more brittle, and they dropped about 6 inches in height, and our jaws became smaller and less strong. We have to have braces now because we have crooked teeth because our jaws are smaller. We have to have our wisdom teeth removed. So are we really healthier eating non-meat diets?
But I would argue the reason that happened is because we increased our consumption of animal products to such an extent. Now, animal products leach calcium from our bones because of the excess protein. So I'd actually argue that all these things that you just described is due to, as you say, the mass commercialization of agriculture, which was massively animal agriculture. So all these elements that we have now, all these problems we have, the inflammation or the arthritis, all these problems can be linked heavily to the fact that we consume animal products.
Are you sure that the studies are just wrongly not citing the fact that the reason the American diet is so unhealthy is because of our high consumption of sugar?
No.
We consume so much sugar and carbohydrates, including the grains, the corns.
Yeah.
We know that the corn is going to make us fat and unhealthy.
Okay, what makes us fat is fat, and what's found in animal products is saturated fat and trans fat.
I wouldn't say that's true.
Carbohydrates can metabolize into fat in our bodies when we don't use them and burn them up like we should. But what clings to our body is the fat, and animal products are full of saturated fat, trans fat, and cholesterol, which are the three things that clog our arteries and cause atherosclerosis and heart disease and all these problems that are actually our #1 killers of people here in the US. So
well we can there's good fats and bad fats, okay?
Of course, always.
And we can sit here and argue all day about diet.
Yeah, we can.
And really there are so many different conflicting studies out there on either side, and I would say that for a lot of people, I would say veganism, if it's something you want to do and try, go for it. I know that there are people who have gotten benefits from it because you are consuming mineral vitamin rich stuff when you're doing the plant stuff as well. But what I will say is this: it's not sustainable for long term for the entire global population. So that's kind of the place I'm standing at right now, and I still haven't heard anything that proves otherwise.
And I'd just like to say thank you for the conversation. Yes. I agree with many things that we said, but I disagree wholeheartedly with a lot of them. Yes. I believe that it is sustainable, and I would like to say I don't think you said anything that would reverse my opinion on that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
One
so.
question.
Yeah.
Based on what you guys were just center to your discussion, what does that have to do with this particular farm? Like, why not a big industrial farm that's...
Okay, yeah, so
that's a good question.
Why is this farm being targeted and not some big industrial factory farm?
So we were at Case Farm Slaughterhouse earlier this morning. This is our second place of the day, and that place is a mass industrialized slaughterhouse where they bring factory farm chickens in. So this is just another side of the spectrum, but the bottom line for us is the slaughter, right? And these animals are all going to be slaughtered. So for us, morally, there isn't much difference between a factory farmed animal and, say, a locally organic family raised animal, in the sense they're all going to be killed anyway, and that bottom line is they'll die, and it's wrong because it's unnecessary. That's how I'd answer that question.
Okay, so then here, let me ask you your stance then on human abortion.
All right,
because a lot of vegans tend to be a little bit more liberal, and they tend to be pro-abortion. So many Christians, ethically, morally, would say that that's wrong to kill a human being, whether it's capable of sustaining itself alone outside the womb at that time in its gestation or not. But how What's your standpoint on that?
So I've been raised in the UK, and abortion isn't an issue in the UK because it's been legalised, I think, longer since I've been born. So for me, I don't see abortion as being an issue up to a certain point because, you know, when a human baby is just a collection of cells, they're not a human baby in that sense. So I would say the life of the woman who has her own rights and has autonomy over her own body would supersede the right of cells.
What point would you say that it's not a human cell, though?
And I don't know. That's the question, right? I don't know that.
Because currently we have up to 24 weeks, which is 6 months gestation, and it only gives 3 months left.
Yeah.
So would you say that that's immoral to kill a 20-week-old baby in the womb?
I don't know about the laws here, but I've heard that the laws that are often cited by the right-wing are laws that are taken into place when the woman is in danger and her life is in danger. So I don't know, I can't comment on that, but that's what I do know is a lot of the people, especially from InfoWars on the right, would cite stuff that's extreme.
If the woman is not in danger, if there's no risk to the woman's health,
right.
Because they can still get abortions up to 24 weeks, whether or not you're in danger or anything. It's right now, the woman can go choose to have the baby killed. Right. So, you know, you mentioned a lot morals and ethics.
Yeah.
And talking about killing a life. And your main issue here is that they're going to be killing these cows for meat.
Right.
So how then can you justify killing a human in the womb?
Well, I would justify up to the point where the human baby is no longer becomes conscious or sentient, because then it's about that version of life that the human baby has. And I think the issue is, we have overpopulation, which is a huge issue that's going to affect us all. So, you know, when we look at abortion, if we're going to let every baby that's born on this planet be born, then we're going to have huge issues of population continue to rise. A lot of the time, these people that are against abortions, the right wing, the evangelical Christians, they're totally against people having abortions, but as soon as that baby's born, they don't want to provide welfare or benefits or anything to look after the baby.
So you said when the baby becomes conscious or sentient,
right.
then it would be wrong.
Right.
Would you say that these animals have the same consciousness and capability of consciousness that we do?
No, I wouldn't say that, but pigs, for instance, are as clever, have been proven to have the same cognitive abilities as a 3-year-old child, so they're more intelligent than a baby up to the age of 3, you know, by scientific studies. So if you're going to go by intelligence and cognitive abilities, then a pig's life should be worth more than a newborn baby's life.
Okay, well, I don't know. I would say I definitely disagree with you on that.
But that's
one.
science, right? That's science, so you can argue science, but that's
agree.
Okay. That's what.
Definitely disagree
with
that,
because
but if you look at the rate at which an animal ages, the 3-year-old pig is nowhere near the rate at which a 3-year-old child ages.
Right.
We live a lot longer, so you cannot compare the two. A 3-year-old pig can breed. A 3-year-old child cannot.
Yeah, but you're basing our worth of life based on cognitive abilities and intelligence, and I'm saying if that's what you want to do.
No, that's what you were doing by saying that you wanted to think it's okay to abort babies in the womb if they don't have a consciousness or cognitive ability
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So I feel like we've gone off tangent here on the abortion one because, like I said, as long as
it's somewhat hypocritical when you say.
I don't think it's hypocritical. I throw that back on you. So you say I'm a hypocrite for that. I'd say you're a hypocrite if you're against abortion, but you consume animals, because you're against abortion because you say it's not right to take a life, but then you take lives every day. So we're both hypocrites in that sense, all right?
Because I would say, well, I will say this. My morals and ethics come from my Christian belief system. And what I will say is that I do believe it's wrong to kill another human being.
Yep.
And if I'm going to adhere and reference Christian belief systems, I will say that it says so in our Bible that we should not kill other humans and man. But it also does say that God says eat meat sparingly. So he doesn't say don't eat meat, don't kill animals. He says he put them here for us to have and use.
Right.
So,
do you think that a benevolent and compassionate God would be happy with us killing his animals if we didn't have to?
Well, I think that actually, if you want to get into the God in the Bible, Cain and Abel, Cain killed Abel because God didn't like that Cain brought him vegetables and fruits, and Abel brought him meats as a sacrifice.
Right.
So actually, God wanted him to make the sacrifice and kill the animal for him.
Right.
So,
but we don't do that anymore.
But
animal
what I'm
sacrifices
saying is
aren't necessary
that's what I'm
anymore.
adhering to. My morals, my principles adhere to Christianity.
Right. But animal sacrifices aren't needed anymore.
Morals and ethics and principles. If you're just going to say you're solely like an atheist and you believe in science and that we're no different animals,
I think we are different.
If this is an animal kingdom, survival of the fittest.
Do you think that humans are animals?
I don't.
So what are we?
I believe that we're conscious beings here, that we were put here from God, and that essentially we have domain over these creatures. We're to love them, we're to respect them, and I will agree with you this. I don't think that some of these factory farms are right. But what I will say is this behind me doesn't seem to be a factory farm. It doesn't seem to be torturing or putting these animals in inhumane conditions. Now, the houses where you have the chickens and they're like crammed together and they're pecking at each other and their legs are all messed up and they're being tortured, I would say that's wrong. I'd say look into that. I would say we should have some reform. I will agree with you on that. And I think many people who even consume meat will agree that we can push for more ethics and humane treatment of animals, and that we should look at more ways to humanely kill animals. It's interesting to notice that I don't see you guys outside, protesting outside of the Humane Society. The Humane Society catches dogs and cats and they put them down to sleep. And they
but you don't know what we do in other days, right?
But you say that that's humane.
No, I don't believe it's.
They believe that it's humane to put the animals down to sleep.
Right.
So I would say that there is a somewhat humane way to kill.
Okay.
We do it in prison systems when somebody has a death sentence. They
that's
have
humane,
lethal
right?
injection.
Yeah.
There's a humane way, and then there's a torture and gruesome way.
Right.
So what I will agree with you on is that we should definitely avoid the torture and gruesome and the mistreatment of animals.
And the way that we kill animals now, is that humane or torturous and gruesome?
It depends. It depends. There are some
It's just throat
places,
slitting, just standard throat slitting. Like we electrify them, or we put a ball in the head and we throat slit them.
or there's some that air pressure.
That's the stun. So the captive bottle pistol stuns them, right?
Yeah.
And then they hang upside down, cut the throat, which kills them. Is that humane?
I'd say it's more humane than a lion kills their prey.
Okay, all right.
Because if you look
We're
at
going
how
off tangents now.
if you look at how lions kill their prey, you know what they go for
lions
first?
are brutal.
Oh, they go for the genitals. They eat the genitals first,
Yeah.
and then they eat them from their butthole out. They literally eat their intestines out. So if you want to talk about humane, but you have no problem with the lions killing their prey.
Why do lions kill their prey?
Because they eat them.
Because they're obligate carnivores and they have to survive. So again, why are we comparing ourselves to wild animals like we did to our ancestors? Animals, again, they rape and they kill and they do horrible things.
What I'm saying is, because you're saying we're animals, I'm saying out of the animals under your idea.
I feel like there's a argument here that never gets said directly. Just that if we're humans are animals rather. What makes us special animals and what is a special difference about humans, that we have willpower, over our emotions. We have reason and rationality. These things make us wholeheartedly human, different than animals. So that ability to will ourselves and discipline ourselves is what puts us a step above. And with that will do better, we should try and be gentle gods to life and creatures that we see below us, and not angry gods that imprison life and breed things exist for our oral enjoyment. Oral full. Anyways, so that was fun. That was a fun little TV series. Leftist YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. If you watched any of that, I was watching most of that too, and put on some music actually. Maybe just through Spotify. It won't crash my computer. But yeah, that was the Utopia Academia segment of this broadcast. Kind of putting on television that I think is going to help elevate us and the world to a better, more harmonious place. In the zeitgeist of the world, and trying to change the zeitgeist of the world to be a little bit more utopic. And what's been my utopia alternative lately? I think controlling chaos. Human story. That's kind of what we're trying to do here on Earth as humans, as rational animals, trying to rein in chaos. But I feel like people think with the word utopia that is a finished place, that chaos has been completely pushed out of the picture. Only peace is abound, and in a way, I think that is the objective. But in reality, utopia for realists. Are we? We'll see that back there. Utopia. That's just not possible. But we should strive for it. That is the whole point of my channel. That's a new interpretation of utopia that I'd like to purvey to a wider audience and have more conversations about. So if you're into that kind of if you're on that wavelength, that vibe, stick around. follow me if you can. Trying to get to affiliate would be cool. Feel like I'm actually doing something here on this channel. And I will be on live weekly, at least broadcasting the YouTube playlists that I think are important or that we can learn from. Having on guests who will help me analyze or just about these topics that I don't know, just don't get talked about enough, or if they do, it's kind of depressing to a degree. But if we do it more often and become more comfortable, exposure therapy to the climate crisis and existential dread, if you will, I believe start to settle into who you truly are and move forward with your life. That kind of existential dread taken care of in your brain, not as a big weight anymore that goes unaddressed. So today I'm going to get out of this, then maybe find a Wisecrack video as a link for Ren, and try and make an account on Ren, see what their whole climate, I say, carbon footprint profile. It's actually worthwhile. My window a bit. So this was the first one, but I think it was only, maybe if I join white. No, it says it expires in a week. It did let me click through though.
This video is brought to you by Keeps. What's up, guys? Michael here, back with another Philosopher Reacts, because once again...
Oh, this is the Keeps video. I think the Rick and Morty one is the Ren.
This video is brought to you by Ren.
Low key. We couldn't find the username with that referral link. Okay, wait. Well, might have clicked on it. Start calculating your footprint. What country do you live in? Entering. Okay. Yes. You guys know my zip code. Like to calculate your household or just car to get around? Ride share, drive a hybrid, or rent a car? Just check. I use my car like once a week, but it is for a long trip. So yeah. How many short flights do you take each year? 4 round trips? No. 8 flights. 8 one flights. There. Probably take 1 round trip. Flights per year. Go back. I can't go back. Okay. Short flights. Long flights. Say 1 round trip. What is your diet like? It is like vegetarian. How often do you have milk, cheese, or other dairy products? A couple times a week? Wait. Milk, cheese, or other dairy. Count each glass of milk, scoop of ice cream, bowl of yogurt, or hunk of cheese. So, I do personally... Ooh, someone's here. Who's that? Oh, it's Zorgan. I know where you live. Dude. Of course you do. What's up? How are you? What's your diet like? Anyways, you reduce your animal product consumption in any way for the planet? So what was I gonna say about this? I work at Starbucks, but they have such good milk alternatives, like oat milk. I'm usually just drinking oat milk. Times servings week day. I mean, I'm really trying to cut it out, but I'm gonna say that I eat cheese in my bean and cheese burritos, and I order those enough, and I have sour cream at Chipotle and cheese, so I'll say a couple times a week. That's only fair. Do it, Zor. You're a bad leftist if you don't. Did you see Austinox's video of Hassan Yu as he claims why being a vegan is stupid? Very convincing arguments. How big is your living space? Shared living spaces divided by the number of roommates. Okay, that's fair. I live with 4 people in quite a large house. I think it's large. Hey, do you know floors and square footage better than me? Is my house 3,500 square feet? It probably is, right? Don't put that. Like 3 bedrooms? 3 bedrooms. 2.5 baths? No. 3.5 baths. You're not good at that? Okay. Definitely walk or bike. It's a mansion. Dude, is it a mansion? I guess it is. Like, so hot dog shaped. It doesn't feel very spacious. That's... Yes, you're not wrong. But I don't own this shit. Yet, just like his song. Dang, my footprint went up in the last couple of questions. Miles do you drive each week? 50 miles? Let me see. Okay. I literally make a trip every week, and sometimes I don't even do it every week. Some weeks I'm not driving. out to here. That is about 61 miles there and back. Oh. How many miles do you drive each week? Um, 200 miles a week? No. No, I mean like 150. 150. Oh, true. Mine's like hybrid is 50 miles a gallon. Man, very lucky. I get around 40 though. I'll say 39. Oh, thank God. 1% less than the United States average. Woo! There's a win. How much do you spend on furniture and appliances? Hey Zor, if you're still there, how are the levels anyways? My mic compared to the music, like pretty good? Or is it garbage or slightly off? What are your feelings? How much do you spend on furniture and appliances per month? Spend? Furniture? Not a lot. I'd say less than a little. 53. In average, I guess. Can you hear the little lo-fi music that I'm playing? And am I loud enough? Like usually my mic's not loud enough. You're like, Drew, why is your stream always like lower than everything else? Well, I think I bought something. $200, so that's like 4 months worth at 50. And now all the time. They like other $20. Really don't buy furniture. It's good. It's godded. Godded tier. Thank you. How much do you spend on clothes each month? Each much. A little. Each month. I probably spend around $50 clothes. But it's all thrift store stuff, so that's why it's a little. I do have a bad case of retail therapy, but how often do you go to the thrift store? I was there today. I didn't buy anything. Then I was in Oceanside yesterday and I bought this. I bought that Queen shirt that you saw at a secondhand store. Then I bought another tie-dye shirt for $5. No, this was $5. The Levi's shirt. I like the color. Then the other tie-dye shirt was $1.50. That was cool. And I bought a Star Wars poster. That was also $1.50. Like a holographic one. In the car still. Alright, show you. And then I went to Target. Have you seen any mid-century modern nightstands? Mid-century modern nightstands? Mid-century modern? Wait, yes I have. Why? I feel like I definitely have. I actually saw more nightstands than I thought, and I was like, oh, those are kind of modern. I don't think mid-century though. Anyway, yeah, good deals, dude. There's one in Oceanside that is like the DAV and like some veterans one, and they're like a classic. Like, we get in tons of bullshit. You can just buy it at $1.50. Like, they're like a department store size. They're really sick. That Queen shirt was secondhand, but they were like a boutique shop. Like, curate the garments that they sell. That was actually $18. Not a deal, But I mean, all things considered, it was a cool shirt that I bought new, and it was pretty much in new condition. It bought new at like, I don't know, you could sell that at a Queen concert for, you know, $30. So whatever. Anyways, how much do you spend on all other stuff every month? Category includes phones, household supplies, and that you can, not like phone subscriptions. Household items. Okay, it's supplies, not and stuff, not food. I usually don't buy a lot of stuff. I'm happy with just buying clothes. Is that what they asked me last time too? It was clothes, yeah. So stuff, definitely different in their eyes. And I really wait on big purchases. Like I'm usually saving for an expensive phone or an expensive laptop or some music or streaming gear. But so like in a month, definitely a little. But like 100 to round it out nice. Don't spend nothing. How much do you spend on? I just bought 3 candles. But it's because they were $3. Dude, Walmart is the last place I ever want to shop. Like, that's just too much. I'd rather support anyone else than Walmart. I don't know what it is. Probably because they like use government subsidies and what the welfare state to make up for paying their employees wages. Like most people who work at Walmart are on food stamps and stuff. After I heard that, I was like, and you're like the biggest corporation ever. Easy though, because they don't, you can't beat their prices. Nah, buy from Amazon still. Over at Walmart. I don't know. But you would live in LA. I wonder how the thrift stores are out there. Probably have to go in that morning or something, like with all the old ladies. How much would you say? I'm gonna send you a pic of what I want so you can be on the lookout. Okay, dope. I actually wanted to like make that a thing at a certain point. Maybe not a business, but kind of like a, I don't know, it could be a business. I just don't think it's a good enough idea to actually go with it. But basically put in your request to a for a store hunter, like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. Yeah, basically they go hunt for that item that you want. All the thrift stores. It could be like Uber. We hire people to go to thrift stores, and you get mad when you're at the thrift store and you see these people hawking all the thrift store new items that come out for their clients. Get out of here. Drutopia, thrift hunter. Bid on you. How much you spend on services per month? Health insurance, phone bills, subscriptions, hiring, accountant, or you fall free. Fuck. The average is really $9,000. What? Jeez, I couldn't survive. That's more than a bi-weekly paycheck. Well, I paid off my car. That my phone paid for. So I just have insurance. I pay for my health insurance through my employer. but that costs money. Like $1 in that. Right there between just in other services, made, but it's like low at the like $50. What other services do you have? Think of mine. I'm just gonna say probably like $250. No, I said it was already at 300 between those two, right? Health insurance, car insurance. Yeah, that's like 320. Okay, it's the little 315. Okay, we did it. How much electricity do you use when I'm streaming? More than I should. But I'm just one person. Wait, I feel like I'm doing it for the perk. I almost lost the plot here. Oh, Prime, nice. I go back to the top. Oh, okay. I did pick just household, or just me. Press household. Yeah, Prime, but that's $100 a year. So it's still gonna put me right there. At a little. Electricity. So for me, I do watch everything I do. It's most likely pretty conscious about it. I know, Amazon Prime is like $10 a month. Consider it. Still in the ballpark of like $315. Renewable energy do you purchase or pay extra for renewable energy, or you have your own solar panel or down? That sort. None. I cannot do that. How much natural gas do you use? Most bills for now. I like how there's not even a little. I'll put the average. No, I shouldn't put average. I should put, because I'm only showering. I don't really cook. Kind of funny. But like, how often do you eat out? Instead of using your natural gas to cook your own meals. Because if I put a lot, my carbon footprint would go up. But then it's like, yeah, they're probably using gas stoves at Chipotle. And I'm just not. So I had to drive to Chipotle. So yeah, fuck it. We'll put average. Quiz complete. Guys can all email me, send me climate offers and news. I don't even care. Do it. Do it, Ren. I looked up Ren's Instagram profile. I have like 1,000 followers. They're really just getting started. Surrender. Being invited by Wisecrack. Subscribe and will protect 10 extra acres of rainforest. Cute. So do you remember this? Or I think you were here. I made this. ecology. They're like, this is what I was a member of before. I was 6 months climate positive. Basically, this is a charity that does the same thing as Ren. Just give them the $10 a month that they need. Wow, there's a cake in my apology birthday tree. Our second year of climate action. Good job, ecology. I mean, I still respect it. You know, they're doing what I think is good, but this was the lame part that I thought. You know, the biggest impact have lifestyle. Like, you know, mark what you do with your lifestyle, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna eat less meat. Mark it, and they're like, cool, you marked it. And it's not a very satisfying website or organization. I know that's hard, and like their first and primary thing wasn't to gamify giving to, wasn't the gamifying part, you know, giving back to the planet. But for me, I feel like that's gonna be an important part to get people in. And yeah, this is kind of all they gave you, and go read articles about what they were correctly. But when Wisecrack did a video on this, and they sponsored them, I was like, oh, these guys actually ask a lot of cool questions. You get to make a more personalized profile, and if they're doing similar work, which both these companies not boasting incredible numbers that outrange each other or anything like that, they seem very comparable at the moment, then do kind of want the one that's more gamified, a little bit more fun for the consumer, who doing nothing more than just,
this video is brought to you,
I don't know, trying to help out climate crisis. I see their commercial for it too.
On their own carbon footprint. Ren is a website that helps you calculate your carbon footprint and then shows you how you can offset your footprint by funding projects that do things like plant trees and protect rainforest. Ren knows that you might not have the time and energy to spend your weekends getting sweaty and dirty planting trees, so they make it easy for you to help fund those projects. I was excited to learn about Ren's Biochar in California project, which removes dead trees from redwood forests with high fire risk and turns them into biochar, a stable form of carbon that lasts for thousands of years. As someone that lives in California, it feels good to know that Ren has projects that directly impact important local issues. So to get started, all you have to do is answer a few questions about your lifestyle, and Ren will calculate your carbon footprint and help you reduce it. Sadly, a zero carbon lifestyle is impossible, but Ren can help you offset what's left over. Once you sign up to make a monthly contribution that will be used to offset your carbon footprint, you'll receive monthly updates from the projects you support, so you will actually see the impact that you are making. We all know it's going to take a lot of work to slow down the climate crisis, so why not start today? We've partnered with Ren to plant 10 extra trees for the first 100 people who sign up using our referral link. So go to www.
Wait, did he say 10 extra trees? I guess they did say that. We'll plant 10 extra trees. That's kind of funny. Didn't they say on the first one that they were going to plant 10 extra acres? I can't remember. That's crazy. That was 10 acres. Should be 10 acres. Come on, Ren. You 2,000 follower Instagram company. Do better. Alright. Offset. Good tooth. California Fund. High quality proven climate projects. Your subscription also jobs. First habitat. Leave dates. Month. carbon neutral is less than is 19 a month. Custom plan. Offset a custom amount 50% of your emissions via the California Fund. Offset my emissions, start at 9.88 dollars a month. Dang, it's expensive. Like complaining about $20. It's actually a pretty good deal, right? You're living your life, frickin' privileged California, United States of fucking imperialist America, and you can't, you know, you're doing your best to buy secondhand, and you know, you want to still live a carbon neutral life. $19.99 a month. That's a pretty good deal, am I right? Like, I mean, you don't get anything out of it. I'm not, like, I didn't make this channel or anything to try and flex or be some like moral agent that I just sits above everyone. Like, I literally think that it's just the right thing to do, that we all have to do the thing. And you see me cringe at it. I'm like, I don't want to pay $20. Like, but it's just, no. If I can't do stuff directly, and I'm not literally not doing anything charitable to the planet, I'm only taking and taking and taking. No, that just makes me feel like sick, and I could ignore it. And I guess that would be happy, have more money, but at the end of the day, like, literally have nightmares about exit crisis that we're not other parts of the world, like used as like child slave labor for organ get harvested, black markets, and all that happened in the West too. But like, and you know, maybe I'll never be able to do anything about all that stuff, but can take care of your direct neighborhood, you know? I feel like the neighborhood that I'm in is protected by what we've done as Americans, the privileged Americans that we are. You know what I'm saying? Not saying that it's all been that happy about the means by which we got here, but if we're not giving back, a certified asshole, in my opinion. Dang. And you know what? They did ask for my zip code at the beginning, so that's probably why. Pretty expensive, right? So let's see their guarantee. Oh, sorry. I didn't even read what you said. What a good hashtag ad, but it sucks that big companies have done that. Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be our burden, but at the end of the day, it's all of our contributions. We take what we want from the market, so we don't control what the market is like providing to us in every moment to like Target, you know? Utopia is kind of just like everyone gets access to a Target or a Walmart, but mostly a Target from Walmart. Everyone gets access to a Target everywhere in the world. I pretty much think we reached Utopia. Affordable prices for all the things that make life just a little bit better in the home, and then of course having like free housing and decommodified housing would also be really great. So good. Anyways, where was I? Project. Offset. Let you know. Project. Projects that are able to carbon. Guy looks too. He looks like. Oh, is it a video? Hey, what's up?
A huge part of our focus at Ren is partnering with the right projects.
I can't even hear.
We carefully select projects based on 4 criteria. First, we only partner with projects that have a clear, measurable way to reduce carbon in the atmosphere. They also need to have a lasting impact, not just trees that are planted and
Can you hear him?
years later. Since
So
every
low.
project has at least a little risk associated with it, we usually offset more than we
Low.
need to in order to have
Wait, can you even hear me?
policy
Jesus.
if an unexpected
Why in the
fire
world
or
is
other
it so
disaster
low?
damages a project. All these
I'm
projects
just freaking
wouldn't happen
out.
without your funding, and we carefully screen for double counting, where a project gives more than one group credit for carbon offset happen. In addition to these key criteria, we're as transparent
Guess we
as
can't
possible about
listen to what he's saying.
this means showing you photos of the
Landon
impact you're
Brandon.
having and sharing the stories of the people on the ground making that impact possible. Check out the monthly project updates below to see for yourself the impact you could have by supporting the Ren Climate Fund.
It must be that the video is low. Reason. Project is planting trees. Guards in place to prevent those trees cut, burned, or otherwise hurt. There are unavoidable risks. Buffer and project on purchasing supplies and paying for profitable. Purchase a carbon. Carbon off. Partners. Starting out. Trust him. Trust pilot. Creed 5-star. I don't know. Do they have more potential? Alright. Well, obviously, I'm not going to put any bank information on the screen. Because I'm not pretty dumb, but I'm not that dumb. Don't you worry. But we found out take me about $20. offset my emission. Which before with like, I liked what their price for me. Pretty sure it was a lot less than what it was. Pretty sure it was close to $12 a month. But they kind of, they just gave you a number of like what you were doing compared to the trees that you grew, and it wasn't a full carbon, just carbon reduction, but not a well, they say climate positive. See what I mean? That's a tricky word, climate positive. You're not being like carbon positive, right? Climate positive, like positive towards the climate instead of negative. Anyways, I'm gonna do that off stream. Watch the end of this video. I could do that on my own. Vol instant. I was kind of interested in this. Free rockets?
How you going? So, the Amazon is on fire, and no one knows who did it. Some people are blaming corrupt companies who want to clear the land for business purposes, and others are blaming sneaky politicians that are keen to remove the indigenous people from the land. But you know who I blame? The monkeys. No one ever suspects our big, dumb cousins, but I think they have been fooling us for years, and while we have had our heads turned staring at smelly politicians, they have been practicing their tool-making skills, using leaves for shelter, then stones as hammers, and then finally rubbing sticks together to make fire. And you might be thinking, why would a monkey want to burn down the place in which it lives? That seems a bit counterintuitive, but there is one good reason. The bugs. The Amazon has millions of species of buggies, including the most dangerous spider in the world, the Brazilian wandering spider, which is more than capable of murdering your father with its venom. But what's even worse is the side effect of its venom, which is hour-long boners. Can you imagine how stressful it would be sleeping amongst the trees knowing that there is a Viagra spider wandering around? And I don't blame the monkeys for not getting much done. So once the fires clear all the bugs and the boners, the monkeys will finally be able to reach their true potential, which is pretty scary stuff. And I didn't particularly like the new Planet of the Apes movies, so I'll
probably save my money for that. Get a streaming thing for for Switch.
I'm not sure I'm ready for a real-life remake. And luckily, our universal saviors lock.
I'm probably only gonna do one-on-one matches on Smash Bros. Though, so I hope you like that.
Lockheed Martin don't want to watch another movie either, and have proposed the most brilliant solution ever, dubbed tree bombs. I dubbed them that. And I think they have real potential. I really dig them. Until I remembered that Lockheed Martin, the largest weapons company in the world, has a lot more experience in clearing forests than creating them. So I wanted to run some of my own tests and make some real tree bombs to find out if we really can bomb the Amazon back into existence. So I'm going to test a bunch of things here. Firstly, whether it's possible to make a missile-shaped thing that can hold a tree and
like literally, I need to get one of those spiders imported immediately. Illegally imported. That'd be the scariest sex toy you could have next to your bed. What is that spider? Oh yeah, I let it out before sex so it can bite me. A massive erection. It's really cool, babe. Just watch. Yikes. Imagine.
inside it that can also dig into the ground when it is dropped
Don't
from
even
a
get
plane.
smashed. It's not even fun. it's only for competitive nerds. Just make the game not fun by being so competitive for a party game. Trust me. I don't even have fun playing that game with anyone anymore, except for anyone who's as competitive as me. I guess there are a lot of my friends who are like that, but just know, gotta get competitive.
And whether it is possible to make these containers biodegradable. I also think it's very important to test how dangerous these are. Firstly, because it's fun, which means the return of the tampon shooter. And secondly, I want to know what happens if they hit a living thing, as if we are planning on dropping 900,000 of these missiles out of a plane over a forest, there is a good chance that we are going to release our tree bombs on some poor family of animals that are going to think it's Vietnam all over again. And it is a strange trade-off if you plant hundreds of new trees, but you wipe out all the animals in the process. So now I'm going to try and decide what to make my missiles from. And I attempted to find out what the original article suggested using, but I couldn't find the original article. And the only thing I managed to find out about the missiles was from this website, which has very basic drawings of the tree missiles. The containers have a pointy bottom and then a sheath to protect the leaves. And it has a mixture of soil and fertilizer inside the container, so when the missiles impact the ground, the trees will have a fresh new chance at life. And this is definitely the most American way to plant trees. Listen to this quote from Lockheed Martin. The possibilities are amazing. We can plant more than 3,000 cones a minute in a pattern across the landscape, just as we did with landmines. Also, if you are ever wondering whether you can believe what you are reading, I have developed a very official way of gauging the trustworthiness of a website. All you need to do is check the amount and quality of the ads on the side of the website. For example, if it has an ad telling you that Michael Bublé is releasing a brand new album and parents won't believe it, then you know it is an extremely trustworthy website.
Ooh, did you say Michael Bublé?
Alright, back to picking the materials. So obviously plastic is out of the question, as 50 million years.
Does this guy always cut off the heads of people in his videos? Like, I don't know. What was that show? I mean, Charlie Brown obviously did that. There was other shows. Remind me.
Is a little too long to biodegrade. And sadly, that means I also have to rule out uranium. And then I thought maybe I could use clay, but I think that would break apart upon impact. And after further brain thinking, I remember that time in the school bathrooms when I would sit there throwing wet toilet paper at the roof, slowly creating a rock-hard new bathroom ceiling. And I'm pretty sure toilet paper is biodegradable, so I thought this would be a good thing to experiment with. And it turns out I don't have to.
I'm not good at announcing. Can rockets be used to plant trees? But rockets is weird. They look like little cones that I thought you just stick in the ground, but I guess the idea for them was to be dropped out of a plane and stuck into soil.
Experiment, because the people of the internet have already done the hard work and come up with a couple of recipes for making paper mache clay that I can steal. Thanks, paper mache grandma. I'm sure it would make you happy knowing that your recipe was being used to create missiles. So all I did was take one component out which wasn't biodegradable, and this is the recipe I used. Grab all the toilet paper in your house.
Hey.
Then all the flour.
What?
Then PVA glue. Then I just mixed them all together with a big old drill, and I got this big, slurpy, delicious mess. So then I just made some ice cream cones and dried them, and they get real hard. And if you like, you can stop now, and you have created slippers for Henry J. Waternoose. And I stole that joke from Twitter. Thanks, a foe. Alright, before I go and test these guys out, I just wanted to give them a quick sand down and a paint job so they look like bombs and more clickbaity for all of you in the thumbnail.
Who knows that guy's name?
There. You happy now? So then all we have to do is pack our cones with some trees, and then hopefully the dirt at the front end will make them nose heavy. And then sticking with the toilet paper theme, I'm using a toilet paper roll to shield the leaves. And before you feel sorry for these little baby trees that are possibly going to be obliterated, just remember I bought them with the intention of shooting them out of a gun, and I told them that from the start. crushing any expectations they had for the future. They understand they are never going to be planted in a garden by a loving family that they will age alongside, eventually becoming big enough to have teen lovers carve their initials into their bark, or to have a rope swing placed upon them for young Jimmy to play on. That is never going to happen to these trees, and they accept that. So let's start with a dirt penetration test, followed by a ballistics air cannon test. So I tried dropping them indoors, but my house wasn't tall enough. So I found another thing that is very, very tall. And I don't know what it is, or why it is in the middle of the bush, but thank you people that made this. It is very considerate of you to make a thing for people to graffiti and drop things off. And I have to say, if you're willing to go to such extreme lengths to graffiti, why not do something a little cooler? And also, there's no dirt at the bottom of this structure, so I'm going to be attempting to drop the missiles into these boxes of dirt. And I only have 7 missiles, so if I miss, none of us get any results.
Oh god.
Fuck. Yep.
Oh, there's so many rocks at the bottom.
And I have no idea how these are going to act in the air, as I only tested them from table height, and after missing the first bunch, I finally managed to hit one. And look, I'm going to be honest, I couldn't hit the boxes, so I faked this shot. Yeah, and I also faked the shot of me faking the shot. It was definitely naive of me to think I would just be able to drop 7 of these off a 40-meter structure and hit some tiny dirt boxes with no practice. Alright, let's move on to...
YouTube science is such a joke, bro. But he knows it. But like, also, what is even the point of this video? I don't really understand. I thought these were real, but obviously this is a bad idea from the start. Bad idea for a video.
Plan B. And I actually have 3 tree bombs left. I lied before to build up suspense. So what I'm going to do now is use my repurposed tampon launcher to fire them at much higher speeds at a point-blank range so I can't miss. And to be fair, this is probably a much better way to test them, as the article said they would be traveling at 200 miles per hour, which this air launcher should be able to get close to. So this is the first cone I'm shooting, which I named Little Tree, and this is the second one, which I named Fat Tree. And let's do it. And that worked extremely well. This is definitely the level you would want to dig them into the ground. And here's some slow motion. So the cone's definitely sticking to the ground. But now you may be wondering, how am I going to test if the containers are biodegradable? And so am I. But luckily for me, a previous version of myself made a rough prototype of the missiles and put it in the ground with a baby avocado tree. Good work, previous me. And look at that. After 2 weeks, the avocado tree is missing. That must have been the rats. But the missile is soft and breaks apart and actually has bugs inside it, which are eating it. And let's move on to the final ballistics test. So I just mixed up a bunch of my mama's famous ballistic gel and placed it directly underneath the launcher. And let's fire. And at first I thought the missile just bounced off the top of the gel. But when playing it back frame by frame, you can see that the missile penetrated all the way down to the wood and then bounced back up. And that is a nasty wound. And it actually made a dent in the wood. And I don't think this would kill you, but you probably would have a tree growing inside you, which would make for great fertilizer. And this means, if we are planting trees using this method, we need to accept that we are essentially bombing the animals below the flight path. And maybe you could use this method over areas that are completely devoid of any life, but not over forests with animals in them. Actually, it might be a good thing. Look, it's a win-win situation. Firstly, we get to plant trees, and secondly, we get to wipe out all the monkeys that were lighting the fires in the first place. Lockheed Martin, you geniuses. You know what I reckon? I think we need to let more weapon manufacturers solve the problems of this planet. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and check out some of my other stuff.
Oh. I forget that Lockheed Martin was a manufacturer of weapons. Ooh, the water wars are coming. I've been wanting to watch this video. And then I'll probably log off.
This episode is brought
some second thought, some more leftist YouTube. Yeah, probably do that.
To you by CuriosityStream. Get free access to Nebula, the streaming platform built by all your favorite YouTubers, when you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below. The world is full of valuable resources. Some are valuable because they produce energy, others because our ancestors found them a convenient medium of exchange. But there's one resource that stands above the rest, one that has allowed the continued existence of life on Earth: water. Earth is known as the blue planet. Over 70% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, but most of it is very salty. Humans require fresh water, which represents only 3% of the planet's total amount. Of that 3%, 2/3 are frozen in ice caps and glaciers, leaving just 1% of the water on Earth fit and available for human consumption. If that sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, it's because it is. Climate change and growing water consumption are rapidly depleting this vital resource, and that's leading to global tension. In this episode, we're going to discuss the consequences of our shrinking water supply and what we should expect in the coming decades.
Second thought
Let's start with some
gets,
basic
like,
facts.
Really good footage and B-roll of whatever he's talking about. It's always surprising because he's always like foreign topic, like something that's happening in other countries way more than it's happening in. He's got like high def B-roll of it, and I don't know, constantly impressed by that. Always a good channel.
Human civilization is heavily dependent on water. There's a reason 90% of human populations can be found within 10 kilometers of a body of fresh water. Over the years, some cities have misused their water supply or failed to consider its importance, leading to problems down the line. Mexico City is one notable example. Initially constructed by the Aztecs, Mexico City was once located on a large lake. Over the years, the Spanish drained the lake to make room for more buildings, and today, the city is home to over 20 million people and an acute water crisis. Cape Town, South Africa is another striking example. Beginning in early 2017, the city started to experience a severe water shortage, and over the following year, they became the first major metropolitan area to begin a countdown to day zero, the day they would completely run out of water and shut off the taps. This was quite a wake-up call to the people of Cape Town, and between strict government rationing of water use and an impressive response by the people, the city was able to push back day zero several times, and eventually stop the countdown altogether. But these emergency measures will not be enough going forward. More and more cities are facing water shortages, and the brunt of the suffering disproportionately affects poor people. Those
Salt Lake City, there's waters.
Facing water shortages, and the brunt of the suffering disproportionately affects poor people, those who are already living precariously. Water insecurity and inequality are only getting worse. According to an assessment by the UN, a full 2/3 of the world will live in water-scarce regions by 2025, which could displace as many as 700 million people. And by 2040, most of the world won't have enough water to meet demand year-round. We can get by without most resources, but we cannot live without water. A human being can only survive 3 or 4 days without water. It's non-negotiable. When a region experiences a water shortage, it starts a domino effect that can have disastrous consequences. Water scarcity leads to food insecurity as crops die and farmers can't irrigate their fields. Critical systems begin to fail, sparking violence, either internal between members of the affected population or external by their government to secure more water from contested sources. These are usually small-scale conflicts, and often don't involve the use of military force. Fighting over water is not unheard of, but so far, there have been fewer than 30 instances of armed conflict over this precious resource. This number will increase dramatically in the coming years. So, what factors are causing these problems, and can we avoid them? A big part of the problem is climate change. As global average temperature rises, regional weather can become erratic and unpredictable. We are seeing more droughts, more wildfires, hotter temperatures, and less precipitation, often in already critically dry regions. As these weather trends continue, water reserves will dry up, and regions without the means to secure more water will face a serious problem. We all need to drink water to survive, but we also need to allocate water to produce food. Farming, especially less advanced methods, uses a tremendous amount of water. Growing necessary, region-appropriate crops is one thing, but we humans also have a tendency to demand food that is incredibly water inefficient. The king of these inefficient foods is beef. For each kilogram of beef purchased by the consumer, we spend 15,400 liters of water. Per cow, that's 2.7.
Dang, that never came up in that debate either. Lady kept on railing that vegan dude. How are we going to justify having a vegan diet for everyone if we have to grow more plants? You know, we already just feed those plants to cows and feed the cows, so it's like can't be making more agriculture problem. Don't want to stop eating good for that reason. Yep, I know. It's rough, dude. You don't have to stop, you just have to like reduce it. Like, try out different options. Having like just having every meal of your day be cow, like so bad. You could just go to chicken, that's a start. You go to chicken like once a day, that's another step. You know? Steps. My friend was going through this too, and yeah, it's crazy. There's oil, energy, there's like the automotive industry, the energy industry, and the like agricultural industry, including meat industry. Those are like the top 3 for climate. You do eat a lot more chicken. I mean, that's like the meat industry is bad, but there are different levels for sure where meat and cattle and stuff takes so much more food than chickens, for sure. But also the chickens, they get plumped up artificially, I think more than cattle does, but they have less of a carbon footprint, so it's something. And for some reason turkey has less of a carbon footprint than chicken. So yeah, I always just try and go down layers, like don't eat meat, chicken, like reduce chicken, turkey's better than that, and bug protein, then cricket protein, and then plant protein. For all my insectivores there. Much respect.
7 million liters, more water than you'd find in an Olympic swimming pool. One comparatively easy way to conserve water would be to limit the amount of beef we produce. We in the Imperial Core have become accustomed to being able to buy whatever food we want whenever we want it. This comes with serious consequences, including the use of slave labor in developing countries and highly inefficient farming methods to produce crops we normally wouldn't be able to get in certain seasons. Considering the average American's carbon footprint and level of consumption far exceeds the global average.
Dude, eating bugs, like the best way. Honestly, like, you know, it's just like lobsters, like a delicacy. Like, land's lobster. That's all crickets are.
We need to be willing to make some sacrifices to help mitigate both climate change and stress on the dwindling water supply. The final factor that influences the availability of water is allocation of the handful of major freshwater sources around the world. There exist a number of critical rivers that provide water for huge numbers of people and vast expanses of farmland. And more often, the people towards the end of the chain aren't getting enough. The 5 big locations for control of water are the Ganges, the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus, and the Colorado River.
You know, right now, I don't do sea creatures either. Or river creatures. Mostly because that's like the brunt of warming. Like sunlight hits the ocean all day. The ocean. And like we just dump literally everything into. Don't want plastic, poop, evidence. Out to the big toilet and really take care of it. So I try and keep my diet out of the ocean as well. Yes, water creatures.
I recently worked on a documentary about the state of.
But I heard that like the most ethical protein heavy diet would include like oysters and clams, because they're right around the on a neurological level, like they don't have a central nervous system, kind of like jellyfish. I mean, I'm totally speaking outside of my range here, but the mental capacity of oysters, clams, like, is that of bugs, basically, you know? It's very rudimentary. So they're like the most ethical protein that you could get because it's pretty high protein. But I mean, that doesn't really account for the importance of them in their ecosystems. It's just going off of their like their level of consciousness. That kind of efficacy. Otherwise, it still might be a bad move, because it's still like if we just started farming them, or not farming them, but like taking them out of their natural habitats, then might cause a big problem that we didn't look at before. Oh, and microplastics. It's funny though. Yeah, they do eat microplastics, but things that eat them will have a more concentrated amount of microplastics in them. So us? Yeah, microplastics are a big thing too. Ugh. I don't feel like microplastics is made of big deal enough about the dangers and what our daily actions are doing for microplastics. That's definitely a concern that doesn't get enough attention.
The Colorado River, and the problems we face here in the US are pretty alarming. The Colorado River provides water for 7 states, many large cities, including Los Angeles and Las Vegas, 5.5 million acres of farmland, and over 40 million people.
That looks fun.
It's currently in its 20th year of drought. There is more water leaving critical reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell than there is flowing in. Lake Mead currently sits at 39% capacity, and Lake Powell at 36%. If the drought continues, and at this point people are having to seriously consider whether this is simply the new normal, a large portion of the US will run out of their reliable water supply in a matter of years. States like Arizona are having to start prepping for their own day zero countdowns. And tension between states and between urban areas and agricultural areas is becoming more severe. Each state wants to ensure they get their allotted water, and that's becoming more and more difficult. Fighting between municipal water providers and farmers is constant. The urban areas saying they use water more efficiently and provide water to a far greater number of people, while agricultural areas claim their farmland as their birthright and assert that they're providing a valuable service to the country by producing their crops. While farming is critical, we do produce a lot of crops in desert regions to accommodate spoiled Americans wanting certain foods all throughout the year, which requires an enormous amount of water. Water rights are an incredibly complex and fraught topic, but I suspect American farming practices will eventually have to change. But whether in the US or around any of the other key rivers, many of the disputes over water ownership stem from overuse of rivers, poor logistical planning, and the construction of dams or diversions, which downriver populations feel, often rightly, are preventing them from getting the water they need. This is especially common along the Nile, where Egypt often doesn't receive enough water by the time the Nile has passed through the 9 nations further upstream. Regardless of where in the world these tensions arise, they all present a potential flashpoint for conflict, especially in regions where a water source is shared by nations with less than friendly relations. I'm sure many of you heard the Vice President's recent statement about water.
And here's the other thing, because I also, I'm in a lot of meetings on foreign policy. For years and generations, wars have been fought over oil. In a short matter of time, they will be fought over water.
While it is striking to hear a politician admit that current wars are fought over oil and not to spread freedom and democracy like they so often claim, this is actually a 1995 quote by a former World Bank vice president. We've known for years that our water supply would become a point of contention in the next few decades. We've known for years Any
of the wars of the 20th century about oil, but wars. This picture made this guy look like he was from the 1920s. I was so confused.
(1995) quote by a former World Bank vice president. We've known for years that our water supply would become a point of contention in the next few decades, and we've done very little to mitigate the problem. In fact, just like with climate change, those in power have tried to find ways to monetize the suffering of others. The US is the most powerful country in the world by far. That fact has completely gone to our heads. And because of this, American leadership feels we have the right to invade other nations for literally any reason, or no reason at all. When we figured out we'd need more oil to maintain our dominance, the US invaded countries with large amounts of oil. The same will happen with water. We'll occupy countries where water conflict is starting to pop up, we'll claim we're there to maintain order and stability, and all the while we'll make the problem worse to feed our industrial war machine and quietly siphon off all the water we need. Then you've got individual billionaires like Bill Gates, who has finally gotten some recognition as the terrible person he is for trying to prevent free vaccine distribution in order to make even more money. The Gates family owns nearly 270,000 acres of land, most of it agricultural. If I were a betting man, I would assume that Bill's got some nefarious intent with the water rights on that land. Then, of course, we've also commodified water, and you can now speculate on water futures on the stock market. But we commodify everything, so this should come as no surprise. Though it does seem deeply dystopian to have wealthy people betting on drought severity while they're...
What was that toss? Sick. Like throwing the thickest net thread.
Though it does seem deeply dystopian to have wealthy people betting on drought severity while their fellow human beings suffer. If you put that in a movie script, the producers would say it's too on the nose. But this is the reality of the state of water precarity around the world. Reserves are drying up, key sources of fresh water are quickly becoming flashpoints for conflict, and imperialist nations like the US are gearing up to fight their next generation of wars over water. It's a shame to say that we really shouldn't have expected any different. The only goal of the imperial core and capitalist powers of the world is and always has been the maintenance of global domination and the exploitation of the developing world for their resources. Water is no different. It's a resource that everyone needs, and that makes it incredibly valuable. The water wars are coming. They won't be advertised as such, but watch where imperialist militaries end up. It's only a matter of time.
Dude, the complication of desalinizing water is just perplexes me. I just don't understand how we cannot get that handled. Like, there's so much water. Take the salt out of it. Why is that difficult? Why is it difficult?
If you'd like to learn more about what the world could look like as we approach day 0, I highly recommend you check out World Without Water on CuriosityStream. It's a sobering look at the state of water scarcity around the world, but it does offer a ray of hope. CuriosityStream is an established streaming platform with a solid track record of caring about great educational content and the financial security of those who produce it. They've got thousands of nonfiction titles from some of the best filmmakers in the game. As you probably know, sign up using the link below. It really does help support my channel and educational creators all across YouTube. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, consider subscribing to stay up to date with my latest episodes. If you hated it, go ahead and drop a thumbs down. You can check out my previous episodes by clicking the links on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.
1,000 thumbs down. If it isn't my weekly dose of existential dread. Control the water and you control everything. Old turtle guy from Rango. I'm getting the slight feeling that this guy might not like capitalism. Video. Water wars are inevitable. Nestle. Sweats nervously. Tweets nervously. Damn, I guess Battlefield 2042 is gonna get a live action remake soon. What truly disgusts me is the vast majority of people responsible for this will likely pass away peacefully of old age. They won't be around to see the scars they left behind from their selfishness. We need to invent a new system that doesn't funnel sociopaths to the top. True. I'm from Cape Town. The drought back in 2017 and 18 was extremely tough, but we've managed to make a huge comeback. Last year, during our winter season, the dam levels were at 100%, with some dams even overflowing, and this year rainfall is expected to be even more than last year. I'm 20 years old. Can you all imagine? I used to be a super optimistic person. In a matter of 3 years of following world news, I became a huge pessimist. I mean, you can go back to being an optimistic person. You just have to know all the truths. Like, your ignorance to reality is gonna be the only thing that makes you optimistic, in my opinion. You can will to be optimistic, even if it's, you live in a poor state of the world. Quote, in order to stave this off, first world countries will have to change their lifestyles. Okay, so water wars 100% confirmed. Yes, we are not going to change enough to do anything that really, I don't know, more substance than a drop in the bucket. That was good. Okay, I'm all existential doubt, even for me. For existential crisis, dude. See. No politics today. Alright. That's it. I think I'm tired. I think I sound tired. All this is true. But yeah. So now the end of the stream. I think I want to do the stream more again. It was nice when I was doing it daily. I mean, I could definitely, if it's bullshit like this, I could do it more daily, or at least close to daily, especially in times where I'm not very inspired, which is times like right now. Like, I had 3 days off. I didn't do too much. And I definitely have some leftist YouTube to go through. I guess I want to have more people on and more discussions. Maybe, I mean, I've said that for a while, but it'd be cool if people were in the room with me. COVID being at a different place now, might be possible to do that. But I want to do segments including like the notes that I have. Yeah, you can't see what's in here. Under ideas. Oh yeah, more fun podcasts. L Nerds. Dude, you should be on L Nerds with me. I wrote the descriptions of what all these were in my notes. What's L Nerd about? I think it's just us allowing ourselves to go into the things that we're most nerdy about. Going deep on guest personal interests or hobbies. L Nerds, for sure. Oh no, the Philosopher's Stone. Smoking and talking deeply about life. I haven't been smoking too much lately. So, and for like good reason. I don't know. It just wasn't bringing me pleasure. So that's a good enough reason for me. Notes to Utopia. Ideas and questions to float by guests having to do with making the world better. I did that with my buddy David that I'm still editing. Basic bitch concerns. Change it to just basic concerns on here. A group of Normans speaking on real life concerns and trying to find comfort amongst themselves. W nerds. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. L nerds is just so funny to me. But I mean, if we're going on to you know, we might as well feel like W nerds. Now that sounds like an oxymoron in itself. Whatever. I literally hung out with my friend Matt Williams, and he was like, dude, we should just have a podcast where we just like talk about this stuff and get really scared about the future of the world. Because we don't really have answers. I was like, yeah, I think I've thought of that as a podcast idea too. Pumpkin spice concerns. Dude, that would be really funny. It's like, alright guys, we're gonna do go to Starbucks and get our pumpkin spice lattes and come back and we're gonna talk about real concerns that we have about life. Road to 100 is also a good idea. That's just like a lifestyle podcast I do with friends until we reach 100 years old. We're gonna fucking live that long. And then there will be, the different characters who made it. And we can see who actually makes it to 100 and who doesn't. I think it'll be a good, long-lasting podcast. I have a lot more on my phone, but podcast ideas. Segments. Psychotherapy with friends. If you want to be psychoanalyzed by me, like a random dude, but an empathetic dude who will listen, let me psychoanalyze your friends. Sounds like fun to me. I don't know why. I guess I'm a fan of psychology. I wanted to be a psychologist at some point. As long as I'm not like a doctor, not a professional. All just good fun. Anyways, I'm gonna spend the rest of the night looking at this stuff. I'm also gonna be looking at homework, which is a history of anime class, which has been pretty fun. Learning a lot about just animation. One of the most, I think the oldest piece of animation was from Japan. But they've just been on it. Even though Disney was one of the was probably the world leader of cartoons and animation. Japan was like always doing a thing. They started animation first. Kind of cool. But yeah, let you know how that class goes. Fucking love anime, but this history is very much about like the people who created animation, and like that's just what anime means in Japan. Just animation, not like a genre. So it was a little bit of a letdown here and there, like the class, because it's kind of like the history of Japanese animation, which is, it's just too many modules on the like the longest ago history of it, instead of what I wanted it to be, which is like the genre that hit our shores, you know, in the 90s or what have you, maybe the 80s. I just thought it was going to be like, all right, 80s are here, anime, what are these characters, what's it all about, why is it the way that it is, the techniques, but it's mostly about the animators, the world, the actual world that we live in, those people who created animation. I'm just like, school's so boring like that, dude. But whatever. Yeah, it was fun. Fun stream. I mean, could be a little bit funner, but yeah, you know what? Let's do this more often. I'll be back sooner rather than later, I think. Just to bullshit. And oh, shoot. Dang it. Fuck. That's what it was. I wasn't like, man, this whole time I was supposed to be starting a book club. How annoying. So, with my time here today. Basically, hello, hi, welcome to Notes to Utopia. This is Drew, and the station is called Drutopia HQ. And you know, here I want to also have a book club of the Republic. The Republic is a book that I want to read with everyone. Audiobook. Eventually do it. I'm gonna listen to this on stream with y'all.
We turned in the direction.
I mean, I can put it on, but that's not the same. No, I'm not gonna do that. But in the future, I'm gonna be watching and listening to, I should say, The Republic by Plato. One of the first wise philosophers on the face of the planet. Just putting that out there. Kind of cool. Yeah, audiobook exclamation point might not be great stream. I completely agree with you on that. But you know what? You don't have to be here to participate in the book club. No, you can read the book on your own time. But I want to read this book. I'm reading it. That's it. Plato's Republic right there. I'm on page like 37 right now. But I did want to invite everyone to read it with me. I used to have a Facebook. I used to have a Facebook like book club, and we read a Sam Harris book, and then I'd go live on Facebook and we'd talk about it. We read The Four Agreements. Really great book. I went live and I talked about it, and it was fun. But I also think that, you know, not everyone has time to read books anymore. Audiobooks are a good option. This one happens to be free online, which is cool. It's in the public domain. If I stream this, it's not going to be copyrighted or anything. It's a classic. Interesting. It's philosophical. So, like, yeah, I'm already interested in reading it. I should just, you know, sit here and let it play. Maybe interrupt it sometimes. And then I can just be like, hey, I'm doing a thing. You know, if you want to be reading this book, and let's do it. Book clubs are pretty boring. Like, you know, you're reading a book. Books are boring as fuck. But they're also enjoyable and like rewarding at the same time. I don't know, they're very strange. They're like therapeutic. They're so therapeutic. I like finished Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. That was really therapeutic. Having wisdom, reading wisdom every night, kind of like a, you know, why you read the Bible every night or whatever when you're growing up. Like, I don't know if you did, but I did. And yeah, there's something about it that like minds you, centers you again. So that's what I'm gonna try and provide with some of my free time. Space of where we're doing something boring and therapeutic. But yeah, if we get a Apple flap, or dude, I haven't seen Luke Boy in a while. He'll probably derail the book club. Crazy, but I hope to see them in again. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Next time, maybe tomorrow, if I'm done with my homework, will definitely be first part of Plato's Republic. So if you want to catch that tomorrow night,
direction of the city,
tune in, or you know, watch the vlog or the VOD. Watch the VOD. Yeah. Still okay. Cool. Love, peace, forever and ever. Thanks for tuning in, Zor. You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Go watch Anthony Fantano video and tell me what you think. Alright, later. Bye.